Sissons out at center, and that's going to do it. The big showdown for the Predators, a win for them. They take it by a final of 6-1 here this evening. So 7 straight wins for the Predators.
I liked the way we started. We just had a little bit of a breakdown there, and really liked the response. You know, things we talked about earlier in the year were after a goal against or for, we kind of let the foot off the gas, and I thought we responded really well, and that was a big moment in the game because I thought we were doing a lot of good things. I thought we took away space. I thought we played on top of them a little bit to the identity we've had over the last little stretch, and fun to see Yosi take over hockey games.
It was fun to watch all of it last night. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, the game streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. 7 in a row for the Predators. 7. I feel like Monica Geller on Friends. 7. Ian's here today. Hello, Ian.
What up, what up?
So how about that? 7 in a row last night. We kept saying it's a big game, it's a big game, it's a big game. What's the thing I've always told you guys? I will never, ever, ever tell you that a game is a big game. I will never tell you on November 13th that a game against Vancouver that is not a big game. I will never say, oh, it's a big game tonight, to act like it's important or to try to get people to buy tickets or anything like that. So when I tell you it's a big game and the Predators go out there and they win the big game, then we can be excited about it, just like if they lose the big game, we can be upset about it. One thing I used to not like is I used to hate when it'd be like, it's a big game tonight. Then they'd lose, and it's, they just had a bad night. Whoa. If it's a big game, we got to have consequences if you don't win. But we got to have celebration if and when you do. 7 in a row, and this team has just grown such a backbone. This team, man, they're tough. They're so much fun to watch, and they're fun to watch across all 4 lines and the 3D pairings and the 2 goalies, and it's just night in and night out for the last 2 weeks. It has just been amazing hockey. Even when it wasn't great, like the San Jose game, especially that third period, or the Anaheim game, they still just gut it out. But these 2 last ones at home, I mean, they have put their foot on their opponent and just stomped. And that's exactly what I like to see. This team is hot. And I love it. I love it. In fact, I was watching a game last night. And last night was the game where I started to wonder if this might be a special team. So last night, I'm sitting there eating. And Minnesota scores the first goal. And I didn't like that goal. First of all, I thought Lazan got interfered with a little bit, but whatever. So it's a bad rebound by Saros. It's a bouncing puck. It's, 3 guys could have stopped that goal from happening. They didn't. It's 1-0 Minnesota. And I'm like, man, the Predators have not trailed for 2 weeks. So this is the first time they've been down since Dallas took a 1-0 lead to begin that fiasco of a game that happened 2 weeks ago where everybody put their heads down after it was over and said, oh, man, this season, who knows, this team's not very good. But immediately, Roman Yosi comes in and big boys his way right to the net. Trennan's right in front. Boom. Now you're tied. And I said to myself, I had my fork in hand. I'm like, boy, that was a quick answer. Because I wondered how this team was going to respond. And I'm like, that is a quick answer. And 8 seconds later, Cole Smith, and the effort with which Cole Smith played with in order to put that second puck in the net, they're up 2-1, and I took out my phone. I called my dad. I said, are you watching a hockey game right now? Because this team right now, they've got the juice. Like, I don't know what it is, but they've got it. Because that's what good teams do. You know what good teams do? Good teams, when you play other good teams, like when the Predators played L.A. or they played Vegas, you beat the other good teams. Good teams play well on the road, just like the Predators did at St. Louis, at Vegas, at L.A. Good teams avoid the trap games. They find a way to gut it out, like this team did against San Jose, Anaheim, and Ottawa. And this team in a big playoff caliber game, they find a way to push through and push the other team who was desperate back. And they did last night. This team might be special. I don't want to get too caught up in a winning streak because, again, hot is hot and you're not going to be hot for forever. But, man, there's something about this team. The idea of, oh, well, they scored and now we got to play from behind and we got to, and for the Predators to just immediately not only get that goal back, but then answer again and take the lead and take control of the game. That's what good teams do. Not what hot teams do. Good teams. And I talked about how this team has some 2019 Titans vibes to it. This team's also got some 2016 Predator vibes to it. Everybody's going to want to talk about 2017 vibes. I was on Robbie and Rex Show this morning, and I talked about the 2019 Titans team, and there were people that were, tweeting in or texting in saying afterwards, this has more 2017 Predators vibes. I'm like, whoa. Let's be careful. But remember, 2016, that team did not get off to a great start. They were supposed to. They did not get off to that great of a start, or at least in the middle of the year they weren't very, and they got freaking hot in the middle of the year. And they went on a just straight point streak heater. And that's what this Predators team is doing right now. Now, it's a big one. Tomorrow night, it's like the ante keeps coming up. It's like, okay, it was a big one to be able to beat Ottawa in this kind of trap game. It was a big one to throw the knockout punch to Minnesota's playoff hopes. It's a big is as true of a cup contender as you can be. But, man, this might be something. And they did not let up. They dropped a hammer on John Hines last night, 6-1. And this game reminded me, and I tweeted this out last night, this game reminds me of something. It's weird, what I remember. Because, I remember little things. I remember a goal being scored or how it felt when they scored or just tiny little things. Or somebody will say something to me, and I'll say to them 8 years later, you said something to me once that has always stuck with me. And one thing that has always stuck with me was after Game 4 of the Blues series in 2017, when the Predators took a 3-1 lead. And I said yesterday that I felt like last night's game against Minnesota was like a Game 4 of a playoff series in which you could be either up 3-1 or you could be 2-2. And the Predators ended up winning and dominating, and it reminded me of that Blues series. And I remember that the next day on the air after that game, Floyd had a doctor's appointment. So he wasn't there to start the show. So he shows up midway through the show, and I've already been talking for 2 hours, and I turned to him and I said, GM, what'd you think? And he just goes, I love this team. And that was the way that I started to feel. And in fact, today I went back, I'm like, I know I heard that right. This is what he said after that Blues Game 4. This is what he said in 2017, and this is how I feel about this team.
I love this team. I love watching them. I love rooting for them. They are just easy to fall in love with, And you hear them afterwards, and you hear they're so professional and so focused and so into it and playing so well. And it's, when you see things like that, where everything's working, you can't help but like it. It's like a work of art of some sort.
That's how I feel about the hockey that we've seen over the last 2 weeks. Again, it's a winning streak. I don't want to start saying cup contender. I don't want to start talking playoff matchups. I don't want to start doing any of that. But, man, I love watching this team play. I love watching this team play. And I texted Porth last night. He and I were texting during the game. And I said to Porth, I go, I feel the buzz in the city back with this team. I feel it where people are, people are wanting tickets more. People are talking about it more. I was at my dad's office the other day. Like, what do you think about the Predators? It's starting to come back a little bit here. And I got to tell you, this is a team to get behind the way they're playing right now. Unbelievable. 615-737-1025. Your reaction. 615-737-1025 to last night's victory, where the Predators stand. We'll get into your phones as we always do later today, and it will be earlier than later in the show. We will be giving away a pair of tickets to Tuesday night's game against Montreal. And like I said, people are getting more into tickets now because the team's red hot. So you'll have an opportunity to win those. So be listening for that. 615-737-1025. Now, Caroline called it petty earlier today. Ian, I could hear the
tone through the text.
Yeah, okay, dog. That's what I heard from you today, by the way. Am I off on that?
It just seemed a little bit much.
Okay. I got something I got to get off my chest, and we'll do it next. Stillman and Company, 615-737-1025 here on our program, live from the Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Studios. Here on the program, 102.5-106.3 The Game.
John just said he's very firm. There will be no gray area. Everybody will know what their role is. When there's things that need to be corrected, he will correct them. And I think that New Jersey's loss is our gain.
Back it comes to Roman Yosi, dragging the puck, turning down low right, and it's jabbed into the net.
How frustrating to be swept, first time that's happened in franchise history?
Well, it's certainly disappointing for sure. I mean, you commit and you work 82 games to be able to get in the playoffs, and unfortunately, this series didn't go the way that we wanted it to go, and the fact that we weren't able to win a game is something that we all take personal for sure.
Predator steal again. Cole Smith couldn't get a stick for it. He scores!
And I think John Hines has done a good job. I think he's done a good job. He did a great job last year. He made some tweaks this year. Like, Jared, at some point, I want to come on this show and you can talk about the forecheck. I want you to learn the game, So you're not just saying this is John Hines' fault.
To Forsberg. Here's a shot of the score!
Well, Coach, if you look at the stat sheet tonight, according to Willie Donick, it felt like you guys won in all areas minus the scoreboard.
Some room in front of the score! Are you ready for a frosty?
Someone needs to convince me that Barry Trotz didn't do John Hines really dirty on this one.
Evangelista digs it, gives it out to score! Predators take a 6-1 lead.
I thought from a competitive standpoint, we weren't close to where we needed to be in a lot of areas of the ice. And you could arguably say tonight we got what we deserved.
Is this just the glimpse of an identity that you wanted to see out of this group, perhaps?
Yeah.
Nah, 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 nah. Nah, 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 nah. Hey, hey, hey. Goodbye. Let me just say this. Last night, and look, I know John Hines in his second game as coach of the Wild, or first game or whatever it was, beat the Predators 6-1. And I guaranteed that, Ian, did I not, on the program when John Hines took that job.
Yes, you did.
But last night, they drug John Hines. I got so much satisfaction of seeing Hines behind the bench. Bally Sports did a fabulous job of this last night on the TV broadcast, that when something good happened for the Predators, they would flash to John Hines, and he would have that same just angry look that he would have behind your bench for 3 or 4 years, however long it was. And I just got such satisfaction out of it. I know the Predators love John Hines. Like, the guy, they think he's a great coach. Even Barry, when he fired him, was like, he's a really good coach. I just like the other guy better. And that's fine. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. Well, I never liked John Hines. I never got behind John Hines. I never believed in John Hines. And last night, felt like I was right. And I was so happy watching the Predators as they have truly. Hines, when he was coach, he never shut up about identity. It was identity, identity, identity. We found an identity. I'm like, what's the identity? I watch this team. That's the identity that they're playing with right now. And I just love the fact that the Predators have a coach and that we can watch a product where they actually want to play offense, where they're actually trying to score instead of, we're going to dump that puck down there, we're going to forecheck the crap out of them, we're going to be tough to play against in the hard areas. No, I want the team, and the Predators still forecheck. I want the team that is lighting it up and down the ice. And so John Hines out, Andrew Burnett in. I told you, and I love it. I love it. I was right, and you all were wrong. And this Andrew Burnett, first of all, this dude wins everywhere, right? Guys at Florida, Joel Quenneville gets caught up in what, honestly, he got fired, and he should have been fired in Florida for what happened. And so Andrew Burnett gets put behind the bench, and they win the President's Trophy. Then last year, for some reason, I don't know what it is, Andrew Burnett didn't get a head coaching job, and so he's on New Jersey's bench. And New Jersey, who hadn't won anything in forever, is in the second round of the playoffs. By the way, let's check in on Jersey. How are they doing right now? And now he's here. And the first couple of months of the season, it looked, sluggish and slowish, and it didn't look like it was, they didn't look like they were getting to where I wanted them to be or you wanted them to be, because I thought the Predators were going to be good this year, because I was like, well, they almost made the playoffs last year. and it's kind of the same team. They're going to go with a little bit more young blood. They got rid of some of the dead weight, and so that actually should be a good thing. Like, that should be a good thing because they've got a better coach, so they should just be 20% better. And it wasn't really clicking. And I was kind of, people were saying, hey, it takes a while for the system to change and for the team to adapt to the system. And so I guess I was, okay, fine. I can listen to that, and fine, okay. But now it feels like they've done those things. And they're clicking. And they're clicking on offense. And I like a coach who embraces offense. I like the fact that they go out there and score 6 goals last night. Oh, I loved it. I loved it. And I enjoyed listening to Hines' press conference last night where he was talking about how they just, didn't get to the hard areas and they just didn't. I'm like, man, I've heard this pony show. I've heard this. And we didn't play with the identity we were supposed to play with. I know. Oh, and that kind of win, like that big high-stakes win, that big stick-it-in-the-ground win that they had last night, John Hines didn't win those games. They had some win streaks with him as the coach. That 2021 comeback, the end of the year, that was certainly something. But, I don't think you can argue for 1 second that the Predators aren't in better hands with this guy as the coach because he's a good coach. The other guy, not so much. And so I feel like I did my civic duty to Predator Land when I didn't drink the Kool-Aid with John Hines. And when they turned it around a little bit last year, like once they sold off some of the dead weight and they had the pressure off of them of trying to be a contender, and then Saros got hot and they started winning these games at the end of the year, I was so afraid in my stomach that the Predators were going to keep him. I was like, oh, man, he's probably won enough for them to sit there and say that they're going to keep him, and it's just great. We're going to have more identity talk and more hard area talk and more all of that stuff. And when Barry Trotz fired him, I knew that the Predators were headed in the right direction. And when they hired Andrew Burnett, I hopped right on board. Because, I'll tell you, Andrew Burnett, he's a straight shooter now. And I think he's gotten through to those guys, whether it's the Vegas trip stuff or whether it's the system or anything else, he's gotten through to them. It's clicking. And I love every second of it. So this is going to be the one time that I just say, I told you guys. I told you. For everybody's like, oh, you're not giving him enough of a chance, or oh, it's not. I told you guys. I told you, did I not? Oh, my goodness. So I sent that cut that we played at the beginning of the segment. I sent that to Ian and this morning, and I was like, what do you think? Ian was like, I think it's a little too much. Oh, my goodness. Caroline said it was petty. Just the one time. Is that okay, Ian? Just one time.
I mean, hey, man, we weren't going to be able to stop you.
Yes. And I'll tell you, and again, do you at least agree that the change in coach was a good thing?
I mean, I do think you're a little bit too harsh on Hines. I think he's a better coach than you're giving him credit for. And for whatever reason, I do think he's a better coach than you are giving him credit for. I mean, is he fantastic? I saw Robbie Stanley tweet out a quote of Hines from last night post-game, and I went back and just listened to the post-game, press conference from Hines. Mm-hmm. And I will say, some of the stuff that he says about, being competitive, and it was getting a little old. It was getting a little old for me. I was kind of just like, okay,
You've heard that press conference before.
Yeah, so it was kind of like, we got to be competitive and icing the best identity to give us the best chance to win. And it was like compete level, same thing over and over every day. And I was like, okay, I was kind of over that. But
I will tell you, and that's, again, I talk about those Bally Sports shots of him last night. And I'm like, I think I enjoyed it more because the anger that was in Hines when the Predators just kept putting it on, I'm like, that anger that he had behind the bench was like my anger when he had that anger when he was the Predators coach. And so now I'm elated because my team's just lighting the net up, and I see the anger on him, and I'm like, your problem now, not mine. But Ian's probably right. Maybe it's a little harsh. 615-737-1025 is the phone number, 615-737-1025. We will get into some of your phones. Plus, I criticized Roman Yosi about a month and a half ago. And so now that Roman Yosi is playing his tush off, people are like, what do you think now, Jared? I think that's what we wanted when we criticized. We'll get to that next. 615-737-1025. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical on this Fireball Hot Take Friday. They are proud supporters of the Nashville Predators. That's right, that Hiller logo right there on the ice. I mean, you can't not see the Hiller logos when you're at Bridgestone Arena, whether it's the ice, whether it's, out there right at the very beginning, whether it's even in the bathroom, they got the Hiller ads. Why? Because the Hiller is the best. I love them. This month is Happy's Golden Ticket Sweepstakes at Hiller. Now I know why in the ads in the bathroom, Happy is up there chest bumping Nash, because he's happy that it's Golden Ticket Sweepstakes month. Enter to win at HillerGoldenTicket.com. All you have to do is enter your email, and you're automatically entered to win. Prizes include a $5,000 Hiller gift card, a $1,000 Hiller gift card, or one of 10 Happy Hiller Club memberships. And let me say this, as a Happy Hiller Club member, you will be very happy if you win one of those memberships or if you join yourself. Take advantage of zero-interest financing for 48 months on select new HVAC systems or 36 months on tankless water heaters and whole home generators. Do not miss out. Enter to win now.
Collision on the right side. Cody Glass involved. Now the puck over to the left. Some room in front of the score. Are you ready for a Frosty?
Thank you, Roman Yosi. Watch the patience here. How does that go in? He's got nowhere to go. He's almost on the goal line, and he goes right under the bar. Watch this, Skillsy.
Hospital hockey, lots of patience. Look at this. That is so silky. The ability to just kind of wait for your spot.
Back-to-back three-point nights for you. Do you feel like you're hitting your offensive groove, and is it coming at the right time?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's obviously games where things go in for you, and we've played some really good hockey as a team, and I think just the way we play connected, and it helps me, it helps every other guy when we play like that, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Roman Yosi was awesome last night. I mean, as Dick Vitale would say, awesome with a capital A, baby! The way he played last night, I tell you, and that goal. And you heard, Chris on the call on TV, he's like, I don't even know how he put that puck in the net. And that wasn't even the most impressive thing he did last night. That goal, where he basically walked the dog with the entire Minnesota Wild team to set up Yakov Trenin right in front of the net, who just popped it right in there to tie the game at 1. That was more impressive than the unscorable goal that Yosi put in the back of the net. Yosi was excellent. Yosi has been excellent for about the last 2 weeks. So when the Predators weren't playing well, and I kept seeing Roman Yosi on the ice, and I kept seeing the puck in the back of the net, I was frustrated with his level of play. And I said, he's playing like crap. And I tweeted it out. And people got mad. And they took these, fake stats that are, if you look at his ice time at 5v5 Corsi VS487, he actually is one of the top 13 defensemen in the league. See, when Roman Yosi plays the way that he played last night, you don't have to tell me with some made-up stat that he's good. I watched the game. He's good. So people are going back to something I said around the holidays, and they're like, Jared, what you said Roman Yosi wasn't playing well. You're right. He wasn't. I don't understand. Robbie and Joe this morning, they're supposed to be smart people. Like, they are both educated. And they're sitting there being like, what do you think? No. You said, right. He wasn't playing well. Because he wasn't playing well, they weren't playing well. And because they weren't playing well, I wasn't happy. And you can tell me, Yosi wasn't that bad. That's fine. But I'm talking about the standard that is set by Roman Yosi, who is an elite player. He is treated like an elite player. He is paid like an elite player. He is an elite player. So when I watch the games and they don't get the elite play out of him, I get disappointed. Last night, I saw that. I'm like, that is the Roman Yosi that I know. That is the Norris Trophy winning Roman Yosi. You don't have to make up any stats to tell me that dude can play. So I don't understand. Am I not allowed to be happy about that? And somebody last night, they tweeted me when I said, after the commercial break, Trenin scores. I keep wanting to say Yosi scored because Yosi did so much on that first goal to set up Trenin. But Trenin scores. Then Cole Smith scores. Then they go to commercial. And I tweeted out during the commercial, I'm like, I still can't get over the play Roman Yosi made to set up the first goal. And someone goes, I agree. But didn't you say he was playing like crap? Didn't you say that? And I actually tweeted the person back and said, yes, I did say that. Because he was. And now he's not. And now he's playing great. And this morning, that same person tweeted me and Robbie and Joe and said, look at these stats that Valley Sports put up that for the last 9 games, Roman Yosi's been unstoppable. That's the point. That's the Yosi that I know. That's the Yosi that when they get this guy, they can win. And he's not the only reason they're winning now. The goalie's been incredible lately, both of them. And I think I think the real story of this, and I think that the guys that really needed the kick in the ass when it came to the Vegas trip, I think it was kind of the younger bottom 6 type guys, and they have just been awesome. And I keep talking about it. It doesn't Kiefer Sherwood to do what he did against San Jose every night. It'd be unfair. But it's not unfair to say, okay, Michael McCarron, it's your night tonight. Cole Smith, it's your night tonight. Yakov Trenin, it's your night tonight. Luke Evangelista, it's your night tonight. And that's what they've done on this trip. Cody Glass had a beautiful goal against Vegas. Now, I don't know what Cody Glass has done since then, but that's okay. Because, again, we only need you for one of these nights. Well, then we need somebody else to step up. So it's just been, I can't say enough good things about what's happening right now with this team. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. 39 minutes, Ian, before we hit the phones. That has to be a record.
Got to be up there.
That's how excited I am about this hockey team. Chip from Mount Juliet says, Jared, do not get blinded by this run. We have seen this before. This is what blinded David Poyle to keep the team intact. Well, what do you want? What do you want them to do? Like, do you want them to blow the team up? I don't understand what we're saying here. Like, Jared, I don't want the Predators to go trade for Jake Gensel and give him an 8-year contract. Like, I'm not interested in that. I'm not calling for them to do any of that. But as far as looking at my hockey team and saying, man, I am loving the intensity that they're playing with, the production they're getting right now out of the bottom six, the goaltending, to say that I'm looking at that and say, oh my God, I like every part of it. Like that is, why am I not allowed to feel that way? I mean, I should be allowed to feel that way, and I feel that way, and I'm not going to hold back and say, oh, well, they might not win the cup, so just trade everybody. You're not there. You're not there's no reason to do that. Just like there's no reason to trade a first-round pick for Ryan Hartman. There's no reason to do those things. But as far as being excited about how the team's playing, we should be allowed to be excited about how the team is playing. Like, that's what I'm talking about. Unbelievable. Texter said, fair weather hockey fan Jared Stillman is so representative of Nashville. Don't get your hopes up. What have I, again, it's always about me. What have I said that is about getting your hopes up? Have I talked about winning the cup? Have I said, you know what? I think after the last 2 weeks, the Predators could get matched up with Edmonton and they could beat them in a playoff series. Did I say that? Ian, have I said that?
I'm sorry I missed it.
Have I said that they could beat Edmonton in a playoff series? Has this run changed my opinion so much that now all of a sudden I'm saying no vacations until June?
I don't think so.
No! But I can enjoy it for what it is right now, which is incredibly fun, entertaining hockey to watch. It looks like the system that the coach who won a President's Trophy with it in Florida has implemented is working. The goalie is back to the standard of the goalie. Yosi is back to Yosi. Like, this is fun. Enjoy it. The city's excited. I'm excited. Enjoy it. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. So I took AP English in high school. And when I took AP English, what used to drive me crazy was it used to drive me nuts how we would read a Virginia Woolf novel, right? And it would be, okay, so what is the illusion here? Like, what are they saying here? And I would look at the book and I'd be like, I mean, they're just, like, what's written is what they're saying, right? No. You got to understand the imagery, or you've got to understand and now I think that has stuck with me for forever. The experience I had in AP English, that I see some of the irony in real life, and I analyze it like I'm supposed to be analyzing a Virginia Woolf novel. And there is something that is so incredibly ironic about what's happened with the Predators that, quite frankly, I am amazed by it. We'll do that next. 615-737-1025. Another thing I'm amazed by is Window Nation. That's right. I absolutely love Window Nation. They came out to my home. They did a fabulous job. They're online at windownation.com of giving me a free in-home estimate, telling me I don't need to replace my windows, which, again, gives me the trust that makes me think that if you guys call up Window Nation or you go to windownation.com and they come into your home to replace your windows or to give you the free in-home estimate, that they aren't going to go out of their way looking for things to fix. Because, again, they came to my home and they didn't do that. March is a critical time to check your home windows. So call the pros at Window Nation. And right now, for every 2 windows you buy, you'll get 2 windows free. 2 windows equals 4 windows. It's unbelievable. Plus, 0 down, 0 interest, and no payments for 24 months. Again, that is 2 windows every time. You get 2 windows free when you buy them. Plus, 0 down, 0 interest, and no payments for 24 months. Call 866-90-NATION or visit windownation.com. Is it crazy to think that Dallas fiasco might have been the best thing that ever happened to this team?
I think that Dallas embarrassment, certainly you can look at it and say, hey, that might be the thing if we make the playoffs and we have a run, we're going to look, certainly you're going to look back on that game and say, and not only that game, but that run after. What did we do after that? There's a lot of teams that don't go through adversity and all of a sudden it hits them and they're like, whoa, we don't even know what to do. I don't know how to be mad at you and how to yell at you and how to get more out of you because we've just been rolling through the whole season. And so I think that anything you're looking at, it depends on how you work it out. And if you fight together and make it work, then it's all for the best.
There you go. That was Hal on the show yesterday. By the way, somebody needs to call Joe Rexroad, needs to call the Joe Rexroad police on Hal. Because how many times did he say we there, Ian?
I didn't count.
I mean, he said, let's get it again. How many times would Joe get mad at Hal for saying we? Again, Hal, who's on these broadcasts, how many times would Joe get mad at Hal?
I think that Dallas embarrassment, certainly you can look at it and say, hey, that might be the thing if we make the playoffs.
1,
and we have a run.
2,
we're going to look. Certainly,
3.
we're going to look back on that game and say, and not only that game, but that run after. What did we do
4.
after that? There's a lot of teams that don't go through adversity, and all of a sudden it hits them, and they're like, whoa, we don't even know what to do. I don't know how to be mad at you and how to yell at you and how to get more out of you because we've just been rolling through the whole season. And so I think that anything you're looking at, it depends on how you work it out. And if you fight together and make it work, then it's all for the best.
Okay, 4 wees in there. And it is kind of crazy because last night after the game, I texted Sean Henry and I was like, this Dallas game might have been the best thing that ever happened to this team. And he said to me, he goes, didn't feel like it that night, but maybe so the way the team's playing. And that game 2 weeks ago was so disheartening, so embarrassing, so disappointing. And yet, they haven't lost since. Like, they have not lost a game since. And I think that's a sign of really good coaching. And I think it's a sign of a team that's really got some chutzpah, which makes me excited about what I'm looking at right now when it comes to all I wanted this season was what, folks? And see, some people in the text line are like, I'll get excited if they win tomorrow, but I'm not going to get my hopes up. All I wanted this season was an exciting March in April worth talking about the Predators on the radio and one competitive playoff series. And I think I'm going to get my one competitive playoff series. And so I'm happy. But it is crazy to think about where they were 2 weeks ago and where they are now. And how that Dallas game kind of does feel like the catalyst for what has gotten into the Predators. 615-737-1025. Jeff says, text in and goes, why can't you be honest with your listeners? You didn't say Yosi isn't living up to standards. You didn't say Yosi is not playing well. You said Yosi sucks. Why take up so much airtime attempting to prove you're right? You know what that does? You know who does that? Someone who is insecure. So it's funny because the idea of, why can't you be honest with the listeners, Jared? Just because you don't agree with me doesn't mean that I'm not being honest about what I think. Robbie Stanley texted me, and he was talking about how incorrect I was. He said, you said Yosi was playing terrible, which was objectively not true. He was not playing like this for sure. And I said to Robbie, he stunk. He and Fabro just giving up goal after goal. Now this is where
that happened one time.
This is where I got a little out of hand. I said it was like watching Parrish Cox and Jason McCourty again. Now that's a little over the top. Like that, yes, that one, okay. So just because you and Robbie Stanley disagree with me doesn't mean that I'm not telling the truth about what I think. Today on the Midday Show, I annihilated Caroline's phone because Derek Mason, and I love him, but D. Mace said that he thinks Calvin Ridley's going to get $30 million a year. That is how much money Tyreek Hill makes. I'm like, what? $30 million a year for Tyreek Hill? I think Pro Football Focus said the expected average value for Ridley is 17. And D. Mace is talking about $30 million. But guess what? I don't think D. Mace is lying. I think that's what Derek thinks. I think it's wrong, but I don't think he's lying. So when you say, why can't you be honest with the listeners? I'm like, I am honest. That you might not agree with it, but that doesn't mean that's not what I thought. And I did think that. And I know Yosi is so much better than that because we all saw it last night. That's the Roman Yosi that we all know.
I do think it took some time with the new system.
Texter said, Jared, people are, and I do agree with that. And not only that, I also think with Yosi, as compared to other people, where the new system, their responsibility is to worry about them. I do think on the back end, Yosi's responsibility is to worry about a lot more than just himself. And I think that, he was probably playing a little timid because of that. One texter says, Jared, people are mad you called out Yosi for playing poorly, which he was, and now that he's playing the way an $8 million player should get paid, they want to call you out. That comes from Craig. I mean, Craig, I agree. The reason I get mad at Yosi is because we got high standards for him. That's if we saw a third pair defenseman playing that way, I'm not as mad at Fabro, and he was having the same struggles that Yosi was having, way more than Yosi. But the expectations aren't necessarily the same. Texter says, chemistry and keeping the team together has been the excuse for years. No cups. Trade the players if offers come. So, again, I'm not arguing that the chemistry is, I'm not saying that the Predators shouldn't trade Tommy Novak if somebody calls and offers a first-round pick, like Elliott said yesterday might happen because of team chemistry, right? I thought Joe Rexrode, and I know I dog Joe for 98% of the things he says, and that's because 98% of the things that he says sometimes are just freaking ridiculous. But I think Joe's probably right on the money when he says that the Predators won all these games. Barry Trotz wasn't getting anywhere near the offers that he wanted on Saros that would even move the needle at all for him to even think about considering. So instead of everybody waiting and offering low and everything else, he basically gave the trade market the you can't fire me, I quit. And was able to turn it into a positive because instead of saying hey, nobody was offering top dollar for UC Saros anyways, so I wasn't going to trade him. Instead of going to the room and saying that, he's going to the room and saying, you guys are winning and I'm sticking with my guy. I think that's probably what happened. I mean, I don't think the idea of the chemistry thing is that, that's not a part of this. Barry Trotz was campaigning for somebody to trade for Kevin Lankinen the other day. He said that he would trade Tommy Novak the other day. So don't act like this is a new era of Preds hockey, okay? For everybody out there that's oh, well, this is what Poyle would do, or, oh, I'm tired of this, Jared, or I don't like this, Jared, or I don't. Yesterday, the coach on the other bench, that was the old era. This is the new era. And I don't know if that means it's going to be cups or not. I have no idea. What's going to determine whether or not this organization wins cups is if Barry Trotz can truly evaluate amateur talent. That's what's going to decide this. Because if Matthew Wood becomes Matthew Tkachuk, you are in serious business. And if he doesn't, we're going to be waiting for that big boy forward for forever. But that's what this is all about. 615-737-1025. More of your phones. 615-737-1025. And coming up next, so now I got asked the question today on Robbie and Joe. I got asked, are the Predators contenders? And remember, everybody thinks there's a binary option when it comes to the trade deadline. There's buyers and there's sellers. And 2 weeks ago after that Dallas loss, we all thought that they were sellers. They haven't lost since. Are they buyers? We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Tune into 102.5, 106.3 The Game this Sunday for coverage of the Pennzoil 400 in Las Vegas. Now I know why Chase went to Vegas. Got it. Did you know that the Pennzoil 400 was this weekend?
I mean, other than just not really, no.
Did you know that's why Chase is going to Vegas?
Is that why Chase is going to Vegas?
Well, I mean, the Chase is going to Vegas and the Pennzoil 400's in Vegas at the same. I mean, doesn't that seem like that's why he's going to Vegas?
Seems that way, but I don't know that for sure.
So the Pennzoil 400 is in Vegas. Coverage will begin at 1:30. The race starts at 2:30. Coverage also available on the 102.5 The Game app and at thegamenashville.com. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Studios on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. I do want to tell everybody that today on 94.9 The Fan, Vandy Baseball takes on Louisiana in the 2024 Astros Foundation College Classic. First pitch was originally scheduled for 3:05. Now it's been pushed back to 3:40 because the game before went long. So, again, coming up in 40 minutes on 94.9 The Fan, Vandy Baseball. Coverage also available on the 94.9 The Fan app and at 94.9thefan.com. So, 2 weeks ago, who remembers the devastation against Dallas? We all do. And I remember the next day going to St. Louis with the Predators and hosting the show from 9 to 11 and talking about, hey, this team's probably going to be sellers. This team's probably not going to, compete for the playoffs, and they're probably not going to give me my one competitive playoff series. They're probably not. In fact, Barry Trotz was on our program, Ian, if you could, that week on February 13th, I think he was on our show.
Yeah.
Before the Dallas game, before the New Jersey game, and then the Dallas game. And Barry said at the time, whether or not they were going to be buyers or sellers was going to be determined by the team.
If they give us every ounce and they can do it, then we're buyers. We'll go in and get something. We can fix some things, I think, internally. Some other things we may have to go get. But if they give you every ounce and they can't do it, you have to be realistic and not try to force it. And so we could be sellers. But I don't know that yet.
Okay. So then we saw the Jersey game, we saw the Dallas game, and I'm like, well, Barry left it up to the team, and the team is telling him, sell, sell, sell. But they haven't lost since then. And again, what did Barry say? If this team proves to him that they've got it in them, he'll be a buyer, and he'll go out and he'll go get something. And this morning when I was on Robbie and Joe, I was asked, are the Predators contenders? And I've been thinking about that all day. Contenders. Man, that is such a loaded word, right? I said yesterday that the 2019 Titans weren't Super Bowl contenders until they had Lamar Jackson and the Ravens dead to rights. And all of a sudden we said, all right, it's either going to be the Texans or it's going to be the Chiefs. And it's winner goes to the Super Bowl. So clearly you are at that point a Super Bowl contender. But that entire season, we didn't think that they were Super Bowl contenders. At least I didn't. So when it comes to whether or not the Predators are contenders, I can't go there. I can't say yes. And I'm leaning more towards no, right? Because, again, if they get matched up with Edmonton in a playoff series, they're not going to beat them. At least I don't think they're going to beat them. I have been wrong about that before. I've been wrong about saying they can't win a playoff series in which they turn around and swept. Then the question is, are they buyers? Now, I can give you my opinion, and I can give you what Barry told us. Barry told us if the team gives it their all and they prove that they're legit, he's going to buy. He told us that on February 13th. They've won 7 in a row. With that information, based off of what Trotz said and what has happened, it seems pretty likely that they will be a buyer. As far as my opinion is concerned, I don't think they should be buyers. See, everybody thinks that this is so binary. Either you're a buyer or you're a seller. And I don't think the Predators are necessarily that. I think the Predators are what they are. And I start on the buyer front because when it comes to being a buyer, I think, well, what could you possibly buy? Right? Like, what's out there in which you could acquire right now that will make a difference against the Edmonton Oilers or the Vegas Golden Knights or the Colorado Avalanche or one of these teams that is a legitimate, true Western Conference contender? And I'm not sure I really see anything out there that makes me think long-term for the Nashville Predators, this would be a great piece to add that could help them, or long-term for the Nashville Predators, what they would give up in order to acquire something would be worth it. I just don't have that inside of me. Like, do I want a rental forward like Jake Gensel? Why would I want that? I'm going to have to give up a first-round pick, which I don't want to give up. I'm going to get Jake Gensel, who I think is getting up there in age. I've never seen him play without Sidney Crosby, and I'm going to have to give him an 8-year contract at what, Ian, for Gensel? $9 million a year?
I don't know about that, just given his age, but it'll be expensive.
And that's still not going to put me into the category of Edmonton, Vegas, or Colorado. And then secondly, when it comes to additions they could make and the reason that you would be a buyer, I think they kind of have those things right now. The Milwaukee Admirals just won 19 games in a row. They've got some pretty good players on there. So if they need a goalie, what are they going to go out on the trade market and get one, or are they going to go with the goalie that they already have? I'd much rather put Yaroslav Askarov in the net if they have to than I would say, I don't know, Cam Talbot, that kind of player. So I don't need a goalie. I can just go to Milwaukee and get one. If I need a forward, right, again, a guy like Gensel is either a rental and it's going to cost you a first-round pick, or you're going to have to turn around and give that guy 8 years at $7.5 million. Or I could just go get Tomasino from Milwaukee. I could get Parsonen from Milwaukee. Again, none of these guys you acquire are going to be all-stars. Even Liam Foudy, who I didn't think was very good when he was up here. You can go to Milwaukee and get him. Defense, Spencer Stastny is ready right now at Milwaukee to be in the lineup every day in the NHL. Jake Livingstone's played in the NHL. Delgazo's played in the NHL. And Tyson Barry's on your bench. Now, he's been terrible this season, but again, he is a legitimate NHL defenseman. So I would argue against subtracting. Because what are you going to get for Yakov Trenin anyways? But I would also argue against adding, because I think the best adding that you could do is already within your own system. So you don't need to add. I can argue against subtracting, but the priority, again, is the long-term needs of the Nashville Predators. That's why when Elliot Friedman, and I like Tommy Novak's game, but when Elliot Friedman tells me that you might be able to get more than a first-round pick for Tommy Novak, I'm like, okay, we need to listen to this because that could be pretty serious. So I don't, again, when it comes to are they going to be buyers, my answer would be no, but Trotz told us if they proved it, then perhaps. Phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. Taylor says, what do you think happens with Saros? I keep hearing talk of Barry Trotz signing him to an extension. Well, they want to sign a soon-to-be 30-year-old to an extension when they have the kid in Milwaukee who looks like a real deal. I think as far as the Predators are concerned on Saros, they weren't getting offers that they liked. They weren't getting offers that you would have liked. And so they're keeping him for at least right now, and they're pulling the old Floyd Reese. They're not making the decision until they have to. One texter says, as often as I disagree with you, which I assume is pretty often, I completely agree with you here. There is no need to be buyers or sellers, and certainly not buyers for what's out there. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Corey Curtis, News 2, will join us. His reaction to 7 in a row. And there is a big one tomorrow against Colorado, and then after that, Montreal and Buffalo are at home, and they're not that great, but I don't want to start counting my chickens before they hatch. Corey will join us next. I promised at the beginning of the show today that we would give away a pair of tickets to the Predators game against Montreal on Tuesday, and that we would do it in the early part of the show. So let's do it right now. Be caller 5 right now at 615-737-1025, and you're going to win those tickets to see the Predators and the Canadiens from Montreal on Tuesday, March 5th at Bridgestone Arena, and it is College Night with fans from Austin Peay showing their pride as part of the College Theme Night Series with theme tickets including a branded college and Preds hat. Tickets are available at NashvillePredators.com/tickets. Stillman and Company on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. Hey, be sure to tune into 94.9 The Fan this Sunday as Vanderbilt women's basketball takes on Georgia at home. Pregame 12:45, tip-off at 1. Coverage also available on the 94.9 The Fan app and at 949thefan.com. And then tomorrow as well, Vanderbilt men's basketball is on 94.9 The Fan as they take on LSU at home. Pregame at 2, tip-off at 2:30. Coverage also available on the 94.9 The Fan app and at 949thefan.com. The Predators have won 7 in a row. And I'm not going to lie to you. I love what I'm seeing. Corey Curtis joins us from News 2, as he always does, on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. Corey, your reaction to the 7 in a row and the curb stomping of John Hines and the Minnesota Wild last night?
You know, that was something because that was a big game for the Wild, too. I mean, they had every reason to be ready for that game. And you're right. They got curb stomped in that one. It's been shocking to see how these guys have gotten their game together and played. You know, the secondary scoring was something that they desperately needed. Michael McCarron had been coming on. He continues, to come on. But, seeing the other guys start to, contribute on the regular has been really staggering. And now, you're starting to see some of the stars, like, have upped their game as well. And all of a sudden you're winning games like 6-1. I can't imagine that this team has another gear in it. I would have to think this is as good as this team can look.
What's crazy about what the Predators are doing is kind of the fan reaction for me, Corey, which is that some people are, I'm ecstatic. I still don't think they're contenders, but there's also like this sentiment of, oh, no, here we go. Just because they're on a winning streak, now they're going to convince themselves that there's something they're not. I don't get that vibe from them that they're taking this for more than what it is, which is they're playing really good hockey right now. You know Barry Trotz as well as probably anybody. I mean, you don't think he's all of a sudden jumped to the conclusion that this team is bound for June hockey, do you?
Look, Barry was here a long time, and he had a lot of mediocre teams that he pushed to the playoffs, and he had some really good teams that he got to the playoffs, and then he won the Stanley Cup with a really good team. I think he knows what it takes talent-wise and effort-wise, because they're both important aspects of it, to hoist that thing. And I don't think that despite the heater they're on, he would reasonably look and say, well, we're fine now. I mean, I don't think anybody, really could reasonably say it. It's great. It's great what we're seeing. It's fun. It'd be, fun to see playoff hockey. But, I agree with you that I don't think that he can reasonably look at it and say, well, we're built to win the cup now. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've got to strike when the opportunity is there. You know me, I don't give away players. I don't give away players, especially good players. So I need a good offer, or I need to know that I got the person to replace him.
So with that, Joe Rexroad had an opinion, Corey, that I actually thought was pretty spot on, which was with the reports coming out this week that Barry had taken Saros off the trade market, and then I asked him, and he said he had. Joe's opinion was Barry probably wasn't getting anywhere near the offers that it would have taken for him to move Saros. So instead of going to the guys and saying, well, nobody's interested in paying top dollar for a goalie because the last 2 cup champions haven't won with a goalie and nobody's offering it, so Saros stays, he goes to the guys and basically says, hey, I believe, so I'm keeping him in there. And I think that's spot on. And so to that extent, I can't be mad that they're not moving UC Saros because I don't think the offers are good enough. And yet there are still some people that are looking at the conundrum of having the young goalie and the older goalie needing a contract extension next year. And I do think that at some point they may find themselves between a rock and a hard place, Corey.
Well, they might, but again, I'm not going to give him away. And I think you and Joe are right there that it's like the coach who says he's not a candidate for this job anymore. He's taking himself out of it because he knows he wasn't going to get it. And so you're not. Look, Juice has been out there for a while, and if somebody really wanted him or was close, we would have heard more about it. It doesn't sound like the offer got close enough to make that happen. So I agree with you. And yes, at some point you're going to run into that spot when the kid is ready, and you want to get something back for Juice, and I guess you take the chance that at some point you don't. But I'd rather have him play it out than give him away for nothing. I guess is what I would say with that. And you play out this year, and you see what you can do.
So with that, Corey Curtis from News 2 is our guest on the program. Barry came on the show, and he said that he will not lose Tommy Novak for nothing. Elliot Friedman came on the show on the midday show yesterday, and he said that he thinks the Predators could get a first-round pick for Tommy Novak. If a team can acquire Tommy Novak and extend his contract, he thinks they can get more than a first-round pick for Tommy Novak. I like Tommy Novak, but if a first-round pick is on the table for Tommy Novak, I think Barry's got to think long and hard about that one. What do you make of kind of Barry's threat and what Elliott said?
Well, didn't Barry also say that he's made a good offer to Tommy Novak and his people?
Yeah. He says that they're working on the framework, but that they're just not there yet. And Hal brought up a good point yesterday when Hal was like, if Barry's coming on the show and telling you this, he's probably already told Novak's people that.
Yeah, and he's probably putting some pressure on him, saying, hey, we need to get a deal done or you're probably going to go play somewhere else, is kind of what I'm assuming. But, and I like Tommy Novak, but there's a difference between liking and getting a first-round pick. I mean, especially, it depends on, where that first-round pick is. Is it in the first 15 picks or is it in the last 15 picks? There's a difference there. But, Tommy Novak's not Roman Yosi, all right? Right? I mean, how many goals does Tommy have this year?
I want to
15?
say I saw something that was like he has 20 goals, 26 goals through like 80 games in his career or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, no, he can put the puck in the back of the net without question. He's a finisher, which is great. And, if he's on the Preds, I'm not upset about it, all right? But, again, you're talking about a first-round pick. That's a high return on a player that you think you could probably replace because you've got some other young players coming up in your system on a Milwaukee team in particular that's been on a heater for about 3 months.
Corey Curtis is with us here on the program. How big is tomorrow's Colorado game? Again, it's Colorado, who's very good, Montreal, who's not, Buffalo, who's not, trade deadline on Friday. How big is, in your opinion, how big is tomorrow's Colorado game?
Well, I don't think it's that big. I mean, look, last night was big. All right, that was a huge 4-point game. They've got 14 points in their last 7 games. They've given themselves some space in the playoff chase. So, even getting a point tomorrow would be great. You're playing a cup contending team, and you've won 7 in a row. I'm not going to say that you can take your foot off the gas now, but I don't think a loss here is a nightmare. Now, Montreal, you need those 2 points. That's not a good team, all right? You need to score there. But I'm not gonna look at this game and go, well, they lost to the Avs. That's it. I am interested to see how well they play the Avs with how well they're playing.
Sure, like the measuring stick element.
Yeah, sure.
Fireball Hot Take Friday. What's your hot take?
Roman Yosi has been good for a really long time. I mean, that's not fair. Roman Yosi's been great for a long time. This last week, I don't know what he did different, but he played out of his mind. And if he finishes the season like this, he might be hoisting a second Norris. I mean, he's tied for the league leading goals in defensemen. He's only 10 points back of Hughes, in points for defensemen. And he's got 20 games left. If he plays like this the last 20 and the Preds are in the playoffs, he could have a shot at that trophy.
Well, you know how much we talk about big boy forwards and about, McDavid and McKinnon and these – the way he played last night in the offensive zone last night, I mean, that was like watching Austin Matthews last night, the way he played last night.
Well, in the game before, when he came across the center line at 22 miles per hour.
Yeah.
I was like, holy cow. The assist on the first goal. I mean, he skated circles around the entire team. I mean, like I said, he's been great a long time. This last week, I watched with my jaw on the ground. I'm like, this guy is playing out of his mind right now. He looks fantastic.
I do normally end you on your Fireball hot take, but I just want your opinion on this before you get out of here.
Sure.
What do you think about all week my campaigning for the Titans to spend $32 to $35 million a year on Chris Jones?
There's a lot of insanity to it, of course, but I love great players, and he's a great player. And I'll back you up on this. Why did the Chiefs win the Super Bowl this year? Because of their offense? Nope. They won it because of their defense. Mm-hmm. And Andy Reid, I mean, of course he's got Patrick Mahomes. I'm not an idiot. But, I mean, that defense carried them through the bulk of the season. And, Chris Jones is really, really good. So you're not going to get me to say no to a great player. The Titans have a lot of needs, and you're going to have to spell out your plan to fill those other needs while acquiring Chris Jones at the same time. Because I think defensively they can be good with adding a few pieces, but, you're not talking about being good, you're talking about being great. Mm-hmm. Look, you go Simmons, Jones, Landry, Key. I mean, that's a pretty salty bunch. That's looking all right.
Corey Curtis, News 2, as always, on our program. Corey, great stuff. Appreciate you. We will talk next week.
All right, by the way, I do not think they're signing Chris Jones.
No, I don't think they're going to either, but I think they should. Very big distinction there. As always, speaking of the Titans, coming up next, Kevin Byard released by Philadelphia, and the Boo-Hoo Ran crew is loud today. We'll get to that coming up next. Hey, tune into 93.3 Classic Hits tomorrow as MTSU basketball takes on Sam Houston on the road. Pre-game at 7:30, tip-off at 8 o'clock with coverage also available on the 93.3 Classic Hits app and at 93.3classichits.com.
Last one for you. We understand the Eagles are also making some moves. What more can you tell us about that?
They're releasing the Pro Bowl safety Kevin Byard, who they acquired in a trade last October from the Tennessee Titans. And it's not that Byard can't play. He certainly can, but he was scheduled to make over $14 million. And now by releasing him, the Eagles will free up over $13 million against their salary cap. And that's something that every team in the league is now going through, Jay. They're deciding whether or not a player would be worth the cap cost or not, and the Eagles have made the decision to move on from Kevin Byard, informing him of his pending release, and so the player that they gave up a couple of draft picks for will be a free agent, allowed to find work elsewhere, and again, it won't be right now in Philadelphia. They're moving on.
Okay, Kevin Byard is out in Philadelphia. And the boo-hoo Ran Carthon crew, I mean, they are taking a celebration today about, Ran Carthon absolutely fleeced Howie Roseman and the Eagles. I mean, he just stuck it to Howie Roseman. He showed him who his daddy was. And, I mean, as we started the show today, we were talking about how important the Predators' win was last night and everything else. I get texts in the text line that are like, what do you think of that bag of footballs now, Jared? So let's separate a couple of things out here. First off, Kevin Byard didn't have a bad season. Kevin Byard's not a bad player. It is the safety market and the $14 million that Kevin Byard is due to make. The same $14 million that I didn't expect the Titans to be able to pay, or I should say be able, they could easily pay it. The $14 million I did not expect the Titans to pay Kevin Byard this year anyway when he was on the team. But Kevin Byard's not a bad football player. I mean, I was looking up this weekend because I was kind of laughing at the fact that Caroline and I were talking about the Byard pay cut situation. And I was laughing about the fact that last year when all the drama came out about Byard and the pay cut and everything else, the Titan fans were like, well, he's just not worth the money anymore, Jared. He's just, that cap hit is too high. And nobody's talking about how Harold Landry has the highest cap hit on the team. And Harold Landry makes $17.5 million. Is Harold Landry really a $17.5 million player? So last year, it was easy. When we sat back and talked about Byard and said, well, he's just not the same safety anymore. I mean, he's just not very good. They just have to move on. They just have to. You know what his grade was in coverage from Pro Football Focus? 70. His grade overall was 74. That's good. But again, $14 million, you want a great player. The reason the Philadelphia Eagles were able to make this trade and felt comfortable about it was twofold. Number one, the Eagles are going to recoup the draft picks that they used on Kevin Byard in the form of compensatory picks for losing key free agents such as Andre Dillard. Yes, they will receive a draft choice because you signed Andre Dillard. That is a checker. That is a chess move. The second thing about the Eagles and Byard and everything else is that I still don't like the trade. And here's why I don't like the trade. It's easy now to say, well, the Titans didn't have a good season. They won 7 games, and so they were bad, so at least they got something. But then under that same logic, wouldn't you have to then be upset that the Titans didn't trade Ryan Tannehill, didn't trade Danico Autry, didn't trade Derrick Henry, didn't trade any expiring free agent? And I think it was in the best interest of the Titans to not trade Danico Autry and Nick Westbrook-Akine and Chris Moore and every other expiring contract guy like Derrick Henry, because I believe that for the team to be successful for the course of the season, they needed to have those guys. And I still thought, even when it looked like they weren't going to make the playoffs, I still thought to myself, you're better off with Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins for the young quarterback than you are without him. But the reason why I didn't like the trade was because at 2-4, not knowing how the season was going to end, I was not ready to give up on that season. I was not ready to go to my locker room and wave the white flag and tell everybody we're giving up 6 weeks into the year. I mean, the Titans went to London, and they played horrendously, and they still only lost by 8 points. I mean, at that point, again, I'm not going to sit here and make an argument that the Titans were going to turn the season around. And after the London game, I mean, I went crazy after the London game because that was when I realized that the organization's incompetence had finally caught up with itself. Oh, wow, you really can't have a 270-pound center. Shocking, I know. But I wasn't ready to give up on the season. I had seen the Titans at 2-4 before. And I had seen the 2-4 Titans get to the AFC Championship game. So I wasn't ready to give up on the year. And so just because you got a 5th and a 6th round pick back in what is a watered down 5th and 6th round pick, TD talks about this all the time. Basically what's happened, and he would know because this is what he saw at the Senior Bowl, what has happened is with NIL money in 6th years of COVID eligibility in college football, guys that would project as 4th or 5th round picks are going back to college because they can make almost as much money in college as they can make in the pros. So what they're doing is they're going back to college, enjoying the college life, and maybe in some cases even making more money. Austin Gelati is an example of this. He's a pass rusher at Louisville. And Austin Gelati decided to return to school. I think it's for like a 5th year or a 6th year or something like that. And he decided to return to school. He is the co-ACC Defensive Player of the Year. And he is a very good college pass rusher. I don't think this guy will ever play in the NFL. Or at least will ever matter in the NFL. But he still probably ends up getting picked in the 5th, 6th, 7th round of the draft if he ends up going. And 4 years ago, when he was allowed $0 in NIL money, that league minimum of $780,000 or whatever the league minimum is now, that league minimum would have been worth more. So Howie Roseman knew that, hey, this is a watered down, draft anyways. I'm going to give up these draft choices. I'm going to get my compensatory picks for, again, Andre Dillard. I'm going to be able to do that. And we're going to try to take a swing to fix this horrendous defense. But just because the Eagles are releasing Kevin Byard doesn't mean that I think that Rand Carthon all of a sudden pulled the wool over Howie Roseman's eyes and, absolutely, completely fleeced him. I don't think that. And I still don't think it was a good idea to give up on the season because at that time, there was still a lot of season left. So, no, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, wow, boy, you really showed them. You know what's actually crazy in all of this? And I am not defending John Robinson on this, and I had the opinion that I liked the A.J. Brown trade, and I, again, will tell you every time I bring this up that I liked that trade, and it was a bad trade. But the biggest problem the Philadelphia Eagles have right now is A.J. Brown. Okay, that's the biggest problem. AJ's feuding with the Philadelphia media. AJ's feuding with the coach. They are writing in the Philadelphia Inquirer that AJ Brown, I think the headline was, the Philadelphia Eagles have a problem, and it wears number 11 and a headset. AJ versus the coach. When the Titans decided to make the trade of AJ Brown, attitude and his Twitter fingers and everything else was a part of the conversation. And so the Titans said, we can give this guy $120 million, and he's probably going to ruin our locker room, and he's already doing things that we don't tolerate, and he's saying things that our culture's not about, and so we're going to make this trade. And it ultimately got them fired. I mean, it was a gutsy move, and it didn't work. But the problem with the Eagles is not that they acquired Kevin Byard and that Kevin Byard can't play. The problem with the Eagles is on the offensive side of the ball, A.J. Brown's ruining the locker room, and on the defensive side of the ball, they didn't adequately replace their defensive coordinator. It doesn't have to do with Kevin Byard. That's not why the Eagles struggled down the stretch. A.J. was as much of a problem as anything else. So please, with the revisionist history of, oh, wow, I mean, they got, instead of getting nothing in return for Byard, they absolutely fleeced the Eagles. Because that's not what happened, okay? The truth is in October, the Titans gave up on the season. And they gave up on the season because they weren't very good, and they weren't very good because they thought guys who suck, like Andre Dillard and Aaron Brewer and Daniel Brunskill, were going to make a difference. That's why. They thought they didn't need a wide receiver. That's why. And in fact, to this point, there's something about the draft last year. Everybody loves it, right? Oh, my God, Jared, Skoronski, Levis, and Spears. Oh, it's so great. There's something they did in the draft last year in free agency that is hurting them today. And I mean really hurting them. And we'll get to that next, and your phones. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025 if you want to weigh in on that. Again, Kevin Byard released in Philadelphia. And I'll also say this. There are certain things that I know that you don't, that I'm not even really supposed to know. But I know that when I hear Rand Carthon's just the best relationship guy and cares about these players so much, that if you knew when it came to Kevin Byard, well, I'll just leave it at that. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025 here on our program. Stillman and Company, Fireball Whiskey goes down so smooth and it tastes so great. That's right. I love Fireball Whiskey. There is no better way to ignite the night than to do it with ice-cold Fireball Cinnamon Whiskey. Why? Because Fireball Cinnamon Whiskey tastes so great. That's right. There's no better way to start your weekend off. You know I'll be doing that. Big game tomorrow, by the way. We'll be celebrating if they win with Fireball Whiskey. Or as Max would say, if we win. Fireball Whiskey. Ignite the night. Please do responsibly and be 21 years or older to enjoy. That's Fireball Cinnamon Whiskey. One texter says, TD, what do you think of Jared's red-hot take yesterday that he'd rather have Malik Neighbors over Marvin Harrison Jr.? And I did say that.
Jared, you know what? Your red-hot take is not one that you're alone on. There are plenty of people here that feel Malik Neighbors is the better of the two prospects. Malik Neighbors got that juice, and he's got you play him inside, you play him outside. He's a playmaker. Here's the thing with Marvin Harrison, a lot of people, Jr., that a lot of people aren't talking about. But if you go back and you watch a lot of these games, a lot of his stuff was schemed for him to get open. You'll see him like a guy running a vertical route, and he's running, in break and one underneath it. Or you'll see, a 3-by-1 formation. He's backside solo, and you got two crossers over top, and he's running a crosser underneath. And they're just waiting for those two crossers to take the defense out and for him to clear over and hit him on a nice, easy throw. So that's not to take anything away from Marvin Harrison Jr. I think it's unfortunate that he's been so good for so long because he's getting dissected way too much. But that being said, you're not alone in that take.
There you go. That was TD at the Combine saying, yeah, you are not alone. That when you, Jared Stillman, you like Malik Neighbors over Marvin Harrison Jr., you are not the only person who thinks that. I mean, Joe and Robbie, first of all, Caroline and Joe were screaming at each other. Screaming during Jared versus Joe the other day. Were you surprised by that, Ian? We haven't had a lot of Caroline and Joe screaming at each other.
I guess it's bound to happen eventually.
I got to tell you, though, I was disappointed that Joe was like, on the Rex Rant the next day, he was like, was I too hard on Caroline?
He said he apologized.
I was like, Caroline's a grown-up. You can yell at Caroline. It's okay, Joe. She's an adult. And her argument was right and yours was wrong. But again, I am anti-Marvin Harrison Jr. And there has been like a little weird kind of, I don't know what to call it. But I never thought, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is a very, very good player. I mean, don't make a mistake here when I say this. But I just kind of always felt like at Ohio State, he just got more credit than he deserved because he's Marvin Harrison Jr. That if he was Jared Stillman Jr., then he wouldn't be getting that type of love and respect. I never saw Marvin Harrison do things where I was just like, whereas every time I watched an LSU game this year when it came to Malik Neighbors, I thought, now, here's the thing that kills me about this. Mel Kiper's got a mock draft out in which he's got the Titans taking Joe Alton. We've always talked about how the way the draft breaks, there's always going to be one of these guys who is available to the Titans, whether it is the two tackles or whether it is a Dunze or Neighbors, unless it goes quarterback, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. If there is anything that changes in that, you are going to have the choice between one of the tackles at least and one of the wide receivers. And so in some of these mock drafts, you're put in a spot where it's, okay, Alt, Fashanu, or Adunze. Who would you take? In Mel Kiper's mock draft, because he's got J.C. Latham, the right tackle at Alabama, going with the 5th pick to the Chargers, and Rome Odunze going with the 6th pick to the Giants, he gives the Titans the option of Malik Neighbors or Joe Alt. And the Titans are taking Joe Alt in Mel Kiper's mock draft. And I hate it because of how much I like Malik Neighbors. And I asked, Caroline asked Brian Callahan the other day of whether or not Neighbors and Odunze qualified as those elite touchdown scoring players. And he very much sidestepped the question and said that he hadn't really gotten into the college scouting process. Now, if I end up talking to Brian Callahan anytime soon, he will not be able to say that with me because I will say that's bullcrap because you know as well as I do, he has looked at the top talent in the NFL draft. But I do think Neighbors is one of those players. I think Neighbors is an elite high-end receiver, and he's my number one wide receiver. Again, Marvin Harrison Jr., I didn't think was that good at Ohio State in terms of how much everybody's just drooling over him. And I also think he's a diva, and I don't like it. This idea of I don't have to talk to the media at the combine. Everybody else is doing it. Why can't you? Entitlement. I don't like it. Malik Neighbors at least hasn't shown that yet. Or maybe doesn't have that. But I can't draft Malik Neighbors. Because if I'm in that spot that Mel Kiper has in his mock draft, because Peter Skoronski is going to be playing guard and the Titans need 2 tackles and there are no free agents on this market, I can't draft Malik Neighbors. We've told the right tackle story a gazillion times. A gazillion times. We then can't turn around and say, well, they're okay with Jonah Williams at left tackle and Dylan Radins at right tackle, or trying to see if old Nicholas Petit Ferrer, a.k.a.
PT,
whether or not PT can start at tackle for the Titans, because I got to have Malik Neighbors. I can't do it. So when I hear all this talk about oh, man, Rand, he's really on top of it. This is, you got to give him his credit. I'll give him credit when he deserves it. I thought his press conference was great on Tuesday. We gave him credit for it. But at the same time, the mistake to draft Skoronski and the mistake to sign Andre Dillard when Mike McGlinchey was sitting out there in free agency wanting to be a Titan has put them in the predicament right now where they can't draft Malik Neighbors if they get the opportunity to do it. And that sickens me. That's where, again, long-term knowledge of what's coming is incredibly important. Looking ahead to seeing what tackles are out there in free agency. And I know you'll say that John Robinson screwed up the cap, but you guys know that if the Titans wanted to create cap space, for instance, to sign Orlando Brown Jr., for instance, you're going to overpay. But if you're going to do that last season, or sign Mike McGlinchey, who probably would have taken less money than the $17 million he got from Denver in order to come here where he wanted to be, then you wouldn't have to take a tackle with the 7th pick in this draft. And if Malik Neighbors, the top player in this draft, were available to you, the top receiver, in my opinion, in this draft, were available to you, you'd be able to draft him. But now, I cannot sit here and say that if I get put in a situation because Skoronski has to be a guard and because I need 2 tackles and there are not 2 tackles in free agency for me to sign, that I can't have Malik Neighbors. Damian texts in and says, Jared, it seems you love telling the listeners they were wrong and saying, Ian backed me up. But when something doesn't work out like you thought, it's an excuse of why it didn't. What do you mean what I thought? When the Titans traded Kevin Byard, did you think that I thought that he was going to go to the Eagles and be Sean Taylor? What are we talking about? At 2-4, you weren't ready to give up on the season, but the Titans knew he wasn't going to make a difference, and they got a 5th and 6th rounder and a safety that actually played. Damian, Kevin Byard did play. The problem, this is ridiculous. Kayvon Wallace is not better than Kevin Byard, so stop doing that. But the bigger issue here for me was that at that point in time, I wasn't ready to give up on the season. Now, maybe the Titans were, because they knew they did a horrible job last offseason, which is the crux of the issue right here. But I, at 2-4, was not ready to quit. They might be ready to quit. One texter says, if the Titans aren't going to be serious contenders and they think Neighbors is a superstar, why can't they just put Hubbard back at right tackle? Then when they become a contender, they can get a better tackle, and you've already got Neighbors. Because doing that would put Will Levis in danger. And again, all of this is what's best for Levis. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Coming up next, Brian Callahan made a choice that I'm not sure I totally agree with. And I was a little surprised that TD didn't agree with it either. We'll get to that coming up next. Nashville's best deal this week is 312 Pizza Company. 312 Pizza Company serves the best pizza in town, as well as Chicago-style eats like Chicago dogs, Italian beef sandwiches, and more. Get half off a $30 gift card to 312 Pizza Company at theGameNashville.com/deals now, while supplies last. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Studios on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. So I'm not at the Scouting Combine. I didn't go to the Scouting Combine. I haven't been taking attendance of the Scouting Combine. Paul Kaharski brought up, and I'm okay when it comes to Paul, doing the digging and everything else. And I'm okay with the first thing Paul brought up, which was that, as we all know, Brian Callahan and Rand Carthon came back yesterday from the Scouting Combine to attend the groundbreaking ceremony that the Titans were holding for Nissan Stadium. I didn't like it, but I wasn't completely against it. It wasn't that big of a deal, and my guess is that the owner probably wanted them to do it. As I've said, Zoom is not nothing. And so while Anthony Robinson's in person doing these interviews, Callahan and Rand Carthon were doing the Zoom interviews, which it's not nothing. Also, word on the street is they talked to still about 90% of the offensive tackles that they could have talked to. And then on top of it, if the owner says you have to go, the owner says you have to go. I can't be mad at them for that. But there was a choice that Brian Callahan made that PK reported that I thought was very questionable, which was the decision to leave the assistant coaches here in Nashville. So while the Scouting Combine is going on, the assistant coaches, including, most notably, and if we're talking about the assistant coaches and evaluations, Ian, who's the most important of this group?
Big coach.
Big coach, Daddy, Bill Callahan, is at home watching tape. And I'm not sure that's a very good idea. TD was on our show yesterday. I asked him what he thought about it. And again, what's happened to me is everybody thinks that I just am really for something or really against something. And sometimes I'm kind of in the middle trying to figure out how I feel about something. And then I get directed one way or another when somebody makes a good point. Here's what TD said yesterday on the show.
You look at Brian Callahan and his background, having come from Cincinnati and having to play in that scouting role, it's going to be pretty cool to see how that whole process develops.
But are you for or against the coaches watching tape here or them being there in Indy?
I think I'm up to be here. I think there's something that you could gather from talking. Like take today, right? I went over to the podium towards the end, and I was talking to Nate Wiggins, the Clemson corner. And, the conversation that I was able to have with them, feeling that confidence that he had, like, those are things that you feel in person, and why I think it's really good to have meetings in person. So I think if the choice is there as a coach, I would much rather be here at the Combine than anywhere else.
Okay, and I'm like, you know what? He's right. Especially when it comes to big coach, Bill Callahan. But here's what I'll say, because this is the new age way of doing things, right? The coaches stay at the facility and watch the tape, and we'll get with the coaches, and we'll talk to them later. And the scouts go to the Scouting Combine, and they'll get the information, and then we'll bring it all together and have a potluck. That's the new way of doing things. It's either one of two things. It is either the efficient way to do things, or it is the lazy way to do things. And because I don't do that, I don't scout, I don't coach, I couldn't tell you which one it is. So here's what I'm going to say to Brian Callahan and every other one of these coaches out there that thinks they can reinvent the wheel when it comes to the Scouting Combine. Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur, Mike McCarthy, all these guys that are like, I'm better off staying in Los Angeles and going to the beach than I am going to Indianapolis. It's on you now. If your way works, if you've got a more efficient way of doing things, if you think there are other priorities, that's fine. But don't come crying to me when it doesn't work. Don't come bitching to me when all of a sudden you make a decision and it doesn't work, and all of a sudden you're not winning games, and, oh, Jared, we just didn't have the time to be able to scout the players because we were working in a new coaching staff and I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Kyle Shanahan has won a lot in San Francisco, but he hasn't won the big game. And if I was a 49er fan, I could not forgive the fact that he didn't study quarterbacks in the 2017 draft because he assumed at the end of the year he was going to sign Kirk Cousins. Because he had the second pick in that draft and Patrick Mahomes was on the board. And he's lost 2 Super Bowls because Patrick Mahomes has been the quarterback that he's faced in those 2 Super Bowls. I'm not saying Mahomes was a finished product. I think Andy Reid did a great job with him. But did you do your homework? Because I don't think Andy Reid needed a quarterback in the 2017 draft. He had a quarterback. But he did his homework. He went to the scouting combine. I know Andy Reid went to the scouting combine that year because Andy Reid came on this show when he went to the scouting combine that year. And my guess is he got a really important firsthand glimpse of Patrick Mahomes. See, I can't understand why Bill Callahan, with all of his experience, wouldn't go to the combine. Aren't there things that he wants to see from these offensive linemen? Isn't there an attitude that these guys have to have, a personality that these guys have to have? Floyd used to always tell me if he was thinking about drafting an offensive lineman, and this isn't just in the first round where we're talking about Joe Alt or Olu Fashanu or whatever, but if he was thinking about drafting any offensive lineman, he got him around Mike Munchak. And if Mike Munchak gave the thumbs up or the thumbs down, that went a long way. So when you're pulling starters like Eugene Amano and Jacob Bell and David Stewart and Benji Olsen in the later rounds of the draft, you're doing it because you're getting Mike Munchak's seal of approval, thumbs up, thumbs down. And the Titans' excuse this time, like it was when they didn't go to the Senior Bowl, was, well, we're trying to get our coaching staff together. That was their excuse. We'll have the combine, though. Their excuse for this is, well, we'll have our top 30 visits. We'll have our top 30 visits. But if Bill Callahan is at the combine right now and he was in those offensive line interviews, couldn't Bill Callahan be able to weed out guys ahead of time to kind of, hey, thumbs down on this guy. Don't even bring him to Nashville. Don't even use one of the top 30 visits on him. Let's use a top 30 visit on somebody else. But again, Brian Callahan, I guess he has a system that he wants to implement. Again, I don't understand it because where he came from in Cincinnati, the coaches were heavily involved in scouting. So I would figure that he would want his coaches to be heavily involved in scouting. Also, all the Titans have preached about is collaboration. They talked about coaching tape to show the scouts and everybody else so they get an idea of what the coach wants. They're not going to the Senior Bowl because they're trying to figure out what kind of players they're going to want, because they're going to try to figure out what their coaching staff is to then know what players to get. So I don't see why you wouldn't take your coaching staff to the combine in order to do that. But whatever, man. Just don't come crying to me. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear we didn't have time and that's why Johnny was a bust. I don't want to hear it. I'm not going to listen. I'm not going to hear the excuses. I already hear them now. It's like last year. I told everybody last year, this collaboration thing where the coach and the GM have equal power and nobody knows who's in charge, that's not going to work. Oh, no, Jared, you'll see. It's the new way in the NFL. It's what San Francisco does, Jared. No, it's not. It didn't work. It was Vrabel's fault. It was all Vrabel all the time. Okay? So now I'm stuck with a guard with the 11th overall pick. So don't come bitching to me now. And I guarantee you they will. But again, I remember when I took this job. And there's a very popular show in New York at the time. It's called Boomer and Carton. Boomer Esiason and Craig Carton. The show ended because Craig Carton ended up in jail. Craig Carton now has a show on Fox. And I thought that show was probably the best, one of the 2 best local shows in America. It was the morning show in New York. And when I got the job here, I went to our general manager at the time, Jana Hampton, and I told her, I was like, hey, man, I do things differently, okay? Like, it's not going to be the way that everybody else does it. Like, I'm not going to just bring on a guest from Houston to talk about the Texans on a random Thursday and say, well, how are the Texans looking in free agency? I don't do that. And we watched an hour-long video of of the Boomer and Carton show from like 2010 when Rex Ryan was the coach. And it was when the Rex Ryan foot fetish videos came out. And their reaction that morning of their breaking news of breaking down the audio of the Rex Ryan foot fetish videos. And I was like, I'm kind of more like that than I am like the other stuff. And then later I would do something. She'd say, well, why would you do something like this? And I'm like, well, that's what that kind of show would do. And she would say to me, well, but are you those guys yet? And I said, if that's what this is going to be, then I have to do those things. I want to do those things that they do. And ultimately it's worked, right? Like it's worked. So that's how I feel about this efficient way of doing things. Is if Brian Callahan's theory is that these coaches need to be watching tape and that will make it better in the long run, fine. But if it doesn't work, just like Mike Vrabel's decision to hire all of his buddies onto the coaching staff doesn't work, I don't want to hear, oh, well, it's not Jason Hoteling's fault that all the offensive linemen stink. I don't want to hear that. You could have hired somebody better, somebody with more experience. Tim Kelly's calling the plays. Oh, well, they had to change the offense. Could have hired somebody better. Could have gone outside of your comfort zone. So I don't want to hear your excuses if it doesn't work. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025 here on Stillman and Company. We roll along 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
What's it like being your dad's boss?
You know, it's no different than being anybody's boss, to be honest. It's been great. Him and I get along really well. There's not a whole lot of bossing around, if you will. There's not many people that are going to tell him how to do his job. He's about as good at it as anybody. So, but it's been really fun for me. It's been a dream come true to be able to sit and have a cup of coffee with my dad in the morning and talk about what we got coming up that day and talk about pass protection and technique and watch him do his job too has been really fun. I've never had a chance to do that in that element where I'm in the building with him every day. So it's been really, really, really cool for me to experience that. It's been awesome.
Brian Callahan talking about Big Coach, a.k.a. Bill Callahan. And I did think it was funny. I was listening to Rand Carthon's local interview. So what I do think is good that the Titans do this is Rand goes to the podium, Callahan goes to the podium, and for instance, these dudes out of Boston were running up to Callahan at the podium and asking him, what do you think about Alex Van Pelt, the offensive coordinator of the Patriots? Not one person in Nashville cares about Alex Van Pelt. And so I get that. I understand it. I don't have a problem with. But what the Titans do that I think is a really good thing is that they then do a local session where they go off to the side, and it is the people that have traveled from Nashville to Indianapolis that get more FaceTime and more questions asked of the Titan decision makers. And I think there was a question that was asked of Rand. I don't know who asked it, but somebody asked a question about how much, do you lean on Bill Callahan for the evaluation of these offensive line prospects? And Rand's response was, I think you would be an idiot not to do that. And I was like, okay, well said. But again, they left him at home this week. Why is he at home? I at least think he should have been there for the meetings with the offensive linemen. Doesn't have to be there the whole week. Like, again, when the running backs are working, I don't need Big Coach there. But other times, I think I need him there. 615-737-1025, and our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. Jacob says, you are basically insisting that the combine drills are more important than the produced film of their college career. The meetings are important, yes, but what's really important is what a guy does on the field. Now, I will tell you this. Working with Floyd, before I worked with Floyd, I thought the combine stuff was stupid too. The old underwear Olympics, right? What do I care what a guy can run in shorts and a T-shirt when he's going to be out there in the heat in September with giant pads on? What do I care? And the old man was like, oh, no, that's important. Really? Oh, yeah. He's like, if a guy is a 4.42 as opposed to a 4.53, that is massively important. I was like, okay. In fact, when the COVID shutdowns happened and we didn't have any more hockey and there was no basketball, there was nothing else to talk about, basically the show became what I called Titans Today with Jared and Floyd. 4 hours of previewing the draft every day. And one thing that we kept doing was we kept going over these draft prospects at different positions and different things and everything else. And the old man and I were chit-chatting about this, and there was one player that we kept landing on just based off of what he was valuing later in the draft at wide receiver, and that was Devin Duvernay. And obviously Devin Duvernay has had a great career with the Baltimore Ravens and is easily a player that the Titans could have a serious use for. So those things do matter. Now, that takes me back to Big Coach, Bill Callahan. My guess is the positional drills, as far as watching the tape of them doing a positional drill or just getting the statistics back of what a guy did in the 3-cone, he probably, like Floyd, has the experience to know, okay, if a guy runs this time, then he means this. If a guy can do this, then he's that. What I'm more concerned about is the way they do things. Does that make any sense? So instead of, hey, what did this guy look like on the tape when he was playing? How'd that guy interact with the other guys that he's competing with as far as offensive line prospects are concerned? What's he like with his teammates? One thing that a lot of teams do when it comes to these meetings, and I think this is pretty important as well, is a lot of these teams will ask a guy about another guy. So while the Titans could be meeting with, I don't know, J.C. Latham right? And they know they're not going to draft J.C. Latham because he's a right tackle and they have the 7th pick, and the tackles that are ahead of them that'll be there are better than J.C. Latham. They can ask questions about Kool-Aid McKinstry, who might be there in the 2nd round, who might be a corner that they would want to take. And I do think that, again, Bill Callahan is important for that stuff with his experience. That's what I value with the Combine. The real importance of the Combine, now the NFL, the players in the Combine and the coaches are starting to kind of poo-poo this thing, right? Caleb Williams isn't doing anything, and I heard, this probably won't surprise anybody, I heard that Caleb Williams has not interviewed well with these teams. That these teams have walked away. I think he met with 9 teams. And that these teams have walked away unimpressed with Caleb Williams. But Marvin Harrison Jr. didn't do his media availability. Like, the players are kind of like, you know, when it comes to the Combine. By the way, if you were watching the stream, I did the little arm thing where the guy, you know, the little FU arm thing. I haven't done that in forever. But so they're starting to do that. And I'm sure the NFL's not going to like that. And with the coaches that are not going to it, it wouldn't surprise me if the NFL starts changing the rules of the Combine, because the Combine is a very sellable and important aspect to the NFL. And the NFL, unlike baseball and the NBA, they don't let problems fester, right? They nip it in the bud. So it wouldn't surprise me if they do that. The most important thing with the Combine, and this has nothing to do with the topic about the coaches being there or not being there, but the most important thing for the Combine is the medical examination, the one that Caleb Williams decided not to do. That's the most important thing. In fact, Ian and I were talking off the air earlier today about how Floyd would have reacted if he had found out the news that the top prospect in the draft decided not to do the medical evaluation. And I mean, I would have said that he would have gone crazy about that. Like, he would have been like, they ought to change the rules. Like, that's how serious he would have taken that medical evaluation. That's the most important part of the Combine. And it's crazy because, again, it's medical, so it's an individual's health. Like, that's not what's put on TV. Like, the media availability part of it, where all the coaches go to the podiums and the GMs go to the podiums, and then they go around and they do the interview sessions and things like that. That's for the dog and pony show. The guys running the 40, now the 40 is important, but again, dog and pony show. What's important to the teams, the most important thing, is that medical evaluation. 615-737-1025, more of your phones. 615-737-1025, TD. Had a nugget yesterday on this program that it has me concerned for one reason. And I'll get to that coming up next. Fireball Hot Take Friday. Fireball whiskey goes down so smooth. There is no better way to ignite the night and start your weekend than to do so with ice-cold Fireball cinnamon whiskey. Here or abroad, everybody's got Fireball. In fact, it's hard not to be able to find Fireball. So be sure to enjoy. That's Fireball cinnamon whiskey. Shots to celebrate. Fireball cinnamon whiskey. Be 21 years or older to enjoy. That's Fireball cinnamon whiskey.
Yeah, I think there's an element of explosiveness, of speed that we can add that would help us. This is a really fun class of players, really from the top part of the class all the way down to the bottom. There's going to be good receivers, I think you'll find, that'll come off the board in the second, third, and fourth rounds that I think will be contributors for some teams. So it's a deep class. There's really a lot of variations of player. There's guys that are good with the ball in their hands. There's guys that are really fast. There's guys that are big and strong. So there's a good mix of talent that fits. And when you're building the receiver room, you're trying to collect a little bit of all of those things. And so it's a fun class to evaluate, and hopefully we can find a couple guys that fit us.
Brian Callahan talking about the wide receiver room. We'd like a couple guys. So that doesn't just mean, 1, 2, 3. No. That means there may be second round, fourth round, fifth round, sixth round, seventh round, whatever it may be. And so I found this fascinating on yesterday's program when TD joined us, and he said, I know the Titans have been doing their homework on one guy in particular, and it wasn't one of the three that we talk about a lot, Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, or Malik Neighbors out of LSU, but in fact, it was somebody who I think a lot of people think is a first-round pick, but perhaps the Titans are still keeping their eyes on. Here's what TD said yesterday. Who is the receiver that you're writing the story about that you think the Titans are looking at?
I don't think they're looking at. I know. He's out of state. Keon Coleman.
Be hard to get him and the tackle, though.
This is where I was talking about needing to trade up. It's going to be interesting. He's another guy I'm told that the explosive testing is going to be good.
So TD was saying they are all over Keon Coleman. Now, you may say, what would TD know or how would TD know? Remember last year at the Combine, TD came on, and he was literally inside the dome while they were doing the drills, and he was doing the power hour, and he was like very, very like low voice, and he was like, yeah, so the scoop here at the Combine is that the Titans like C.J. Stroud. And we all remember how that played out. So at first I'm like, isn't Keon Coleman a first-rounder? And TD was like, well, maybe they could move up and maybe they could find a way to get him and see what they could. And I don't like that at all. Because the only way I think the Titans can get up into the first round would be to use next year's first rounder. And I have said next year's first rounder is off limits. Because that is what I call your Will Levis insurance. If Levis stinks, and we don't know if Levis will be the dude or not, you have to have insurance, a rainy day fund. If Levis stinks, you will stink. If you stink, your pick will be good, and that could be your quarterback next year. So I don't want to use that first-round pick. But then I was looking at Pro Football Focus, and I think it is important to remember that years ago when Pro Football Focus started, it was very easy to poo-poo, and I poo-pooed Pro Football Focus. I worked with a guy who had been in the NFL for 40 years and had been a GM, and he poo-pooed Pro Football Focus. But the days of Belichick running the show are gone. And now, a lot of these teams invest in the computer to tell them who to draft. And so Pro Football Focus's relevance is, in fact, I think, much higher than it was 10 years ago, because I think more teams invest in farming out their decision-making process as almost a way of either confirmation bias or covering their tush. And so, anywho, when I looked at Pro Football Focus's big board, I said, okay, where is Keon Coleman on the big board? Somebody help me out here. And so I started at the top because I've always thought Keon Coleman was a first-round pick, like 19, something like that. And I kept searching. Keon Coleman, 39th. What pick do you have in the second round? 38. So this would fall in line with the reality that the Titans are going to use their first pick on Joe Alt or Olu Fashionow, and then they're going to turn around and they're going to try to target with that 38th pick Keon Coleman. I don't have a problem with Keon Coleman in the second round. I do think Keon Coleman's a good player. I watched him play in the ACC this year. Now, he dropped the ball a lot against Louisville, so that'll always be, kind of against me. Kind of like the same reasons I don't like Sam Hartman at all. Not as a prospect, because Sam Hartman stinks. But as far as like a college quarterback, I never liked Sam Hartman, because when he was at Wake Forest, Louisville crushed him. And when he was at Notre Dame, Louisville crushed him. So I'm like, he's probably not that good. But Keon Coleman, last year TD told us about C.J. Stroud. Apparently TD's got more info coming on Monday in a story to ESPN. But he says the Titans are circling Keon Coleman. Other receivers that Pro Football Focus kind of has in that Keon Coleman range, Roman Wilson at Michigan, they have at 40. Jermaine Burton at Alabama, they have at 52. And Ricky Pearsall out of Florida is at 56. Or maybe Keon Coleman is a total smokescreen. That could be a possibility too. 615-737-1025. Our phone line is driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. One texter says, Bill Callahan didn't go because Amy is cheap. I hope she invited him to wear a hard hat and take a shovel for a picture at a groundbreaking. Well, if I assume that they took a private plane, right? Because I'm sure Bill or Brian Callahan and Rand Carthon are back at the Combine. So if Brian Callahan and Rand Carthon took a private plane to come back from Indianapolis, guess what? Bill Callahan could have hopped on that plane. So it has nothing to do with money, so hush. I will say this. Did you guys see Amy actually got a good grade from the NFLPA votes? And so you guys talk bad about Amy. I think Clark Hunt getting an F-, and I think every single person who says, well, this is about facilities. I don't think it's about facilities that the owner got an F-. I think it's part of it. Hey, we were promised one thing and he did another. I think it is an everyday cheapness on top of the Tyreek Hill, the Chris Jones, everything else. Amy got good grades as far as the team was concerned. And I went to the Super Bowl and I talked to Warren Moon, and he was just he just loved everything Amy was doing for the Oiler alumni. And I had Chris Johnson on the show at the Super Bowl. And I asked Chris Johnson what he thought of the job Amy is doing. And Chris Johnson said on this show that if Amy had been the owner when he was on the team, he thinks he would have finished his career with the Titans. Not that it was necessary for Chris Johnson to finish his career with the Titans, because at that point in time, Chris Johnson the miles were off the engine at that point. But that's how much he values her. So don't be giving the Amy's cheap. We'll see what they do in free agency. If they go out into free agency and they sign Jermaine Illuminor and that's it, and they say, well, we wanted to make sure we use our cap space wisely, then we got a problem. But we're not there. One texter said with TD's Keon Coleman comment, did he just Diana Rossini the Titans? Well, again, TD had the C.J. Stroud thing before even Diana was running around on TV saying, oh, Titans this, Titans that. So I don't think that that's Rossini-ing them. It has been strange. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but Diana Rossini has not been reporting much on the Titans lately. I maybe feel like that's a little bit, as we talk about confirmation bias, that might be a little confirmation. Just saying. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. So the Predators have won 7 in a row. I've got a Preds thought about this. And I've got 2 massive questions about their success. We'll get to that coming up next. Twice Daily. I absolutely love Twice Daily, and you will too. In fact, I was at Twice Daily today because I was picking up a wrap. That's right. They got all new. I mean, the way they've got the 24 hours, and they've got the convenience, and they've got the snacks, and they've got the wraps, and they've got the made-to-order right there. You can order it from the kiosk when you get there. You can do it right from your phone if you've got the app, just like I do, the Twice Daily White Bison app. Twice Daily has your cravings. Try their new wraps, Italian, ham and cheddar, turkey and Swiss, Nashville hot chicken, and more. They're made to order with your favorite toppings, and you can download the Twice Daily app to order ahead. And, of course, they got snacks where they've got the chicken fingers, the tater rounds, and the new pretzels, salted, garlic parmesan, and cinnamon sugar. That's right. Available now through the made-to-order kiosk, and you can download the Twice Daily app to join their loyalty program today. Specials, discounts, savings, and so much more when you do that. If you're looking for convenience, Twice Daily has you covered. Twice Daily, fresh all day.
Sissons out at center, and that's going to do it. The big showdown for the Predators, a win for them. They take it by a final of 6-1 here this evening. So 7 straight wins for the Predators.
There you go, 7 in a row. Lucky number 7. They go for 8 tomorrow night. Early start, 5 o'clock. Against the Colorado Avalanche. Our coverage, of course, starts at 4 o'clock. So I got 2 questions when it comes to the Predators. Now that they're red hot. Number 1, Are they contenders? And I have been fighting with that all day. Because, as I said yesterday, the 2019 Tennessee Titans were never contenders until they were. Again, when the Titans made the playoffs in 2019, it was on the last day of the season, and they only made it because I think A.J. McCarron played quarterback for the Texans. That's how bad it was, that they rested everybody. So Deshaun Watson didn't play, and DeAndre Hopkins didn't play, and the defense didn't play, and Bill O'Brien and the Texans just rested everybody. They got into the playoffs, and it was a nice run. Way to go getting into the playoffs. Tannehill was great at the end of the year. Couldn't win that game at home against the Texans, but now they're facing Brady and the Patriots. Beat them. Now they're facing Lamar and the Ravens, 14-2. Hadn't trailed since October, hadn't lost since September. Beat them. Now it's you versus Kansas City for the Super Bowl. And of that Titans run, of that era, which closed 2 years ago, the night the Titanic hit the iceberg when the plane from Green Bay brought home an inebriated Todd Downing, the window shut. And the closest they got to the Super Bowl. And we thought they were Super Bowl contenders in 2020. And we thought they were contenders in 2021. And we thought that they were contenders when they were 7-3 in 2022. The closest they got was that 2019 season where we didn't think they were contenders. So, first, I wonder, are the Preds contenders? But let's be real. It's a winning streak in February. You're not the first team to have a winning streak. And nobody wins the Cup in February. Edmonton had their streak last month. And I'm still not sold that this Predators team could beat Edmonton or Vegas or Colorado in a 7-game series. But I'm not going to rule it out. Especially the way the bottom six is playing and the goalie's hot and everything else. So I can't say no when it comes to are the Predators contenders. But I also can't say yes. Also, and this is the exception, not the rule, but hockey is a weird sport. And I'm not going to cling my hopes to the St. Louis Blues in 2019 rode a hot Jordan Bennington, and I'm not going to say, hey, in 2017, the Predators were the 8th seed, and they made it. I'm not going to do that. But we can't rule it out either. And secondly, the other question I have with the winning streak is, are we all aboard the Barry Trotz train? Barry Trotz comes in, has got no management experience. None. He was a coach. Now he's the general manager. They overhaul half the roster. Controversial moves, right? People were mad. Too long for Ryan O'Reilly. They just got rid of Matt Duchene. I mean, they didn't even trade him. They didn't, these 20 goals, he didn't, what are we doing here? Boy, the hockey world was mad when they fired John Hines. At least last night that seemed like a good idea. Now, I'm not one of these guys to sit there and say, in this coach or this GM or this, we trust everything blindly. I don't believe in that. But I do believe in somebody earning the ability to be trusted. For instance, the Atlanta Braves general manager Alex Anthopoulos has been so good for the 5 years that he's been the general manager that when the Atlanta Braves make a massive trade to pick up a former prospect from the Seattle Mariners to stick him in left field, a guy by the name of Jared Kelenic, when they pick him up, I think to myself, oh my God, he's going to be so good. Even though he was a failed prospect somewhere else, because I know there's something they see, something their computer nerds tell them, something their coaches see that make them think this is worth investing in. And the guy has been so successful in doing that over the years that I trust him. When it's David Poile acquiring Cody Glass telling me, hey, just trust me on this one, I don't feel the same way. So I do wonder, now that we see the Brunette system, now that we see the team starting, are we all aboard the Trotz train? So those are my two questions. Are you contenders? And has Barry Trotz done enough in this little time that he's been running the team to make us say, this guy has got it. He's got the plan. He's on board. Yes. Adam in Portland's up next, 615-737-1025. Adam, go ahead.
I believe in Barry because I feel legacy or put him in harm's way. I think he's smart. He's a smart hockey guy, and he's had more, especially like being able to shadow the way that he did. I think he's had more training than what we're giving him credit for. I will say that, like, if you looked at you talk about the 2017 team all the time. What about the President's Trophy team that went in there and really got, I'd say the whole series, Winnipeg had them by the throat. Like, I never thought that was close. Like, we did steal a couple of games, but, like,
They
that
didn't
was
steal
supposed
games.
to be the team.
Like, they
but
smoked
weren't-
Winnipeg in Game 6, and, Game 2 was an overtime game. And then I think I want to say the Predators won Game 3. I think it was Game 4. No, it was Game 3 that they fell apart in. Game 4, they won, and I think they won that one. I think, they didn't steal it, but, Game 6, they smoked Winnipeg. Every time, that was a seesaw series, and every time it looked like the Predators got positive momentum, they got their butts kicked at home.
My point being that I feel like that was the end of the magic, in my opinion, because if it was like, okay, so we have
You didn't think the
going
8-2 ending and the 100-point Central Division Championship the next year was anything?
I thought, dude, you always cut me off. I hate it so much. So you always listen to this. So that was the Preds were magic the 2017 year. The 2018 year, it's like, oh, they do the whiteout thing up there. Like, I don't know. It's almost like a challenge to us. And so I think the 2017 team, who was the 8th seed, coming out and actually going on a run, getting hot at the right moment, is what made them contenders. So I think we could absolutely be contenders just because we're hot at the right time.
So thank you for your call, Adam. That team had way more talent than this team. That 17 team had way more talent than this team. It's reality, right? So let's be careful. Let's be careful saying that. And again, talking about getting hot at the right time, the idea was in 2017, the Predators got hot in the playoffs, but they just couldn't carry the home magic into the Cup final, and they lost to Pittsburgh. So then the next year was, we got to be at home. So they ended up winning the President's Trophy because they needed to be at home, and so every game mattered. Then they got those games at home, and they got smoked by Winnipeg in the home games. So then the next year was, well, we just got to flip the switch at the right time. They go 8-2 the last 10 games. They win the Central Division, and they get crushed by Dallas in the playoffs. I think it's hard for me to use any of those to say, okay, that's what this team is or that's what this team isn't. Chad Withrow, Outkick, will join us next, as he always does on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Streaming on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. Live here on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. Chad Withrow joins us, as he always does, from Outkick. So, Chad, the Combine is going on in Indianapolis, even though, what is it, like 6, 7 coaches are like, nah, we're good. We're not going to go. But now is where all the draft talk is starting to kind of come out. And the Titans talked on Tuesday, and they kept talking receiver, which made me think that the Titans are thinking tackle. TD said the Titans are doing their homework on receivers, but not the top 3, which would be Marvin Harrison, Rome Odunze, and Malik Neighbors. So I start with you on this. Is there anything we can take away from anything that has been said at the Combine that would make us believe, like I believe, the Titans are for sure going left tackle at number 7?
There is absolutely nothing to take away from anything that Rand Carthon or any Titans personnel person would say leading up to the draft, because it is the art of saying something without saying anything. The art that your old co-host Floyd Reese was the master of. Mm-hmm. He had a PhD in the art of saying something without saying anything. And I was around and produced a show when he had his own GM show back in the day, and he was great at it, where he would give you a satisfying answer without really answering any questions or saying anything. I thought Rand Carthon did a pretty good job of doing just that. So, no, I don't think you can take anything away from anything that was said about the Titans. I'd be shocked if it's not either a tackle or a wide receiver with that first pick. I'll also say the 2 things that were big takeaways for me that was actually something said, well, maybe 3. When Sean Payton said the thing he said about the next guy we can't cross off the list based on that guy's jersey. So he's admitting, Russell Wilson's gone. I thought Raheem Morris, when he talked about that if the quarterback had been good, then he wouldn't have that job because Arthur Smith would still be there, kind of tipping his hand about what they're going to do with quarterback, which everyone knew anyways. And the other one was when Joe Douglas talked about filing with the league a tampering charge with Mecole Hardman and everything that happened with that. Those are really the 3 things that I thought was actually something of substance said. I didn't get one thing of substance said from anything with Rand Carthon. It was all talking without really saying anything, which that's what GMs want to do this time of year. So I guess mission accomplished.
In fairness to Rand Carthon, we've been on his ass about the fact that he's been very bad at that. So we do have to give him credit that he did a good job at that. The one thing that does bother me, though, is Brian Callahan went on with our midday show and told Caroline that Peter Skoronski is a guard. So that all the talk about, could they move him to tackle? Could they? Brian Callahan saying he is a guard, which, again, now makes me realize that they need 2 tackles. And this is what gets me mad. Is that everybody pretends like last year didn't happen. Like that Rand Carthon wasn't here last year, that it was all Vrabel's fault, and that last year, Mike McGlinchey was the top tackle on the market, went to the Broncos, would have taken less money to go to the Titans. I know that for a fact. He wanted to be on the Titans. He wanted to be with Rand Carthon, who he knew in San Francisco. And the Titans just weren't interested at all. They didn't do it. Well, because they failed on the Andre Dillard experiment and they drafted a guard with the 11th overall pick, now I feel like the Titans are backed into a corner to where they have to take a tackle. And in Mel Kiper's latest mock draft, the choice that the Titans make is Joe Alt over Malik Neighbors. And I think Malik Neighbors is the best wide receiver in this draft. I'd take him over Harrison. And I mean, it pains me that the Titans might have to do that.
Yeah, and that's squarely on Rand Carthon. And it is disappointing because my hope was that Brian Callahan would see something different in Skoronski and he could play tackle, because I agree with you that it's just ridiculous to use that high of a draft pick on a guard, on a guy who is a swing player and has some positional flexibility, but that ultimately is a guard in the NFL. I thought was a mistake then. I think that what Brian Callahan said on your midday show just confirms what we all thought, that it was a mistake, because he sees him as a guard too. So it almost doubles down on the mistake Rand Carthon made a year ago and still opens up 2 gaping holes at both tackle spots. It's disappointing. I was hoping that maybe Callahan saw something totally different in Skoronski than the previous Titans coaching regime, but that's clearly not the case. And yeah, it makes me go back and second guess last year's draft even more. I mean, look, the Titans and Rand Carthon, they got to get it right this go around. They got to get it right with this high draft pick this year. They got to figure out the tackle spot. They got to help Will Levis. There's got to be improvement. I'm not saying they got to make the jump and be a playoff team this year, but they have to show that they made good decisions in this draft this season with everyone they're bringing in and in free agency, and just show that improvement to really show anyone. I'm not talking about just fans, but the league, that they're headed in the right direction. I'm not convinced they're headed in any direction right now. I don't know they're headed in the wrong direction or the right direction, but this draft and this free agent season is going to tell us a lot about the future of this team.
Chad Withrow is with us from Outkick. So I've been banging the drum over the last couple of days since the Chiefs tagged L'Jarius Sneed. I think the Titans should sign Chris Jones. And I know it's going to cost a boatload of money. I don't think he's going back to Kansas City. I know Diana Rossini came out and she said, sources in Kansas City are optimistic. I don't think he's going back to Kansas City. I mean, Kansas City's owner gets an F- because he's a total cheap ass. And so I think that's over. I would pay Chris Jones $32, $33, $34 million a year to come in here with Jeffrey Simmons and give me the best two defensive linemen, maybe the combination in the NFL, because they technically are defensive tackles, but they both can play wherever you want on the line. I'd put them together. I'd let them wreak havoc. I've talked to fans, callers, everything. Everybody says do it. Trevor Maddich says do it. Chris Sanders says do it. Joe Rexrode says do it. You know me and Joe never agree on anything. And yet there's this sentiment that the Titans, who have been bragging about the amount of cap space that they have and have a $110 million payroll right now, that the Titans will not spend the money. Why won't the Titans do this? Am I talking out of my tush on this, or is this a moment where the Titans need to step up to the plate and do something bold?
I immediately thought about you when I saw that Clark Hunt grade with the NFLPA grades. I think 77% of the league voted on it, and he had the F for an owner. And I'm thinking, it's crazy that the owner of the dynasty team right now, 3 titles in the last 5 years, that gets an F grade. But I immediately thought about you when I saw that grade. So what's the use of having a ton of cap room, which I know you're going to say the cap is fake anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Sure, or cash room.
Just for the purposes of this answer from me, okay? Let's assume the cap is real in some way. But if you've got a lot of cap room and you've got some flexibility, what's the use of having that if you don't overspend on at least one player? Because you're going to have to overspend for Chris Jones. You're going to have to overspend for the best free agents in the market. That's just a matter of business. Because if everything is just, well, I don't think at the end of his tenure with us he's going to be worth it, well, then you're never going to get top players in free agency. Because most every one of those guys, someone's overspending on them to outbid the market to make sure they land them. So I'm all for getting Chris Jones to Nashville. And you are going to have to overspend for him. But, again, I beg the question, if you put yourself in a good cap situation, why not spend the money? Why not overspend on someone when you have that window of time where you're able to do it?
So Mike Herndon at PK's website did a free agent primer in which he signed 9 guys that fill all these different needs, from Jonah Williams at tackle to Patrick Queen at linebacker. And, he did the signing bonus and everything else, which we'll do next week on the program ahead of free agency. But I guess the 9 players took up, and it was $65 million in cap space at the time. I think it's now $75 or something because the cap went up. But it took up like 35 of the $65 million. That's enough left over for me to sign Chris Jones. And my theory on this is Chris Jones, Rand Carthon would be in a better spot with his fan base if it came back that the Titans made such an offer to Chris Jones and he chose not to go to the Titans for whatever reason. He chose not to go to the Titans, and they tried their damnedest. But if it is just the Titans are we got too many holes, Jared, then I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it, Chad.
Yeah, and if they offer him the most money, he's going to be a Titan. I believe that. Okay, I don't think it's going to be, we offered him more, and then he decided to go somewhere else. I really think if they offer him the most money, Chris Jones will be a Titan. And I believe they need to do that. That's crazy what Mike Herndon came up with those 9 free agency signings and still having that much leftover money in the salary cap if they do that. It is time for the Tennessee Titans to make a splash in free agency. It has been a long time since, if you're doing off-season grades, you would put the Titans as a team who took big swings, right? If you go big and you overpay for a couple guys, let's say, there's always going to be someone out there grading free agency and saying, oh, well, I'm giving them a D- because I thought they overspent on these guys or whatever. But regardless, it's time to take some swings. It's time to go big. It's time to make a splash in free agency and not allow other teams to go and spend big for players. I do believe that now is the time for a bit of a transformation of this team where your free agency class and your draft class, combined with the second-year quarterback coming back, is going to be the new faces of your franchise moving forward. And now's the time to do that, especially with their cap situation.
Boy, I'll tell you, I would be singing a different tune about Rand Carthon if he signs Chris Jones. That would be something to behold. More with Chad Withrow coming up next. It is Hot Seat time. Stillman and Company on a Fireball Hot Take Friday, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, Fireball Hot Take Friday. It is Hot Seat time with Chad Withrow. Chad, I always ask you a question if you have a thought before we go to the hot seat. You almost never do. So do you have a thought or do you want to go to the hot seat?
My only thought, once again this week, is how excited I am to be on the hot seat. So fire away.
Combine edition, number 1. Caleb Williams will forgo medical testing at the Combine. Have the red flags outweighed the potential of greatness for Caleb Williams.
The only way I would consider drafting Caleb Williams if I'm an NFL team, and I do believe he is a very good talent. I also think that he got worse from his Heisman year to the next year at USC, which is a red flag to me. And the team got worse from one year to the next, another red flag. And he's the leader of that team. But the only way I'm drafting Caleb Williams, if I'm an NFL team, is if he fires his own father as his business manager. Because Carl Williams is a huge problem for Caleb Williams. There are so many red flags out there about him. Wanting to talk to teams about potential ownership possibilities for his son who's never taken a snap in the NFL. Interviewing prospective agents for his son and throwing out tons of harebrained ideas and then dismissing the agents one by one when they said they couldn't come up with a way to legally blow up the collective bargaining agreement to change the rookie salary structure in the league, because that's what he wants from an agent. That's another red flag. The fact that they don't have an NFLPA certified agent on their team. They got two managers, and he's got his dad, Carl. I think it's going to be a huge problem for the front office. He's going to be a huge problem for whatever locker room he joins. I get that the guy works on football and that he does care about football, but anyone who comes into the league and their first thought is, how can I maximize my money right away? How can I get paid the most right now, maximize my brand? I just don't think is the right way to look at it. And I'll illustrate something that happened a year ago, and we talked about this. Remember Will Levis when he had a chance to ask Peyton Manning a question?
Yep.
And he asked him a question about branding and marketing. And Peyton Manning, you remember his response? Peyton Manning said, worry about being really good at football first. Worry about being a good NFL quarterback, and then the rest will follow. And that's how Peyton handled it, and that's how the great quarterbacks handle it. And I just don't see Caleb Williams as some great quarterback. Again, we don't hear from Caleb Williams. His dad is the one who's talking back channels, and there's reports on him. We don't hear from Caleb Williams as much, but I have to assume that Caleb is Carl because Carl represents him. He is his business manager, and everything I've heard and seen from him is not good, and I'm absolutely staying away from Caleb Williams if I'm any NFL team.
Well, and to the point about the dad, I was thinking about Archie Manning and about, Tom Brady Sr., right? When we hear Brady Sr., he does an interview like once a year, and it makes a headline where it's like, Brady Sr. slams Belichick. I'm like, okay, that's how Tom Brady feels. When Brady Sr. says, and for Bill to give up on Tom that way was so disrespectful, it tells me that Tom Brady was disrespected by Bill Belichick, and Brady Sr. is the one who's like, I'm going to say it, and I'll take the hit. When Eli didn't want to go to the Chargers, it was Archie that got out there and took the hit. And so in this case, when it's like equity of the team and blow up the collective bargaining agreement, to your point, I feel like that's Caleb Williams being like, hey, how can we get the most money? And I think you need to worry about playing football if you're going to lead my franchise, which takes me to number 2.
Well, hold on. First, to follow up on that, ask the question to yourself, is Caleb Williams going to be Todd Marinovich, or is he the Williams sisters? Because we've seen different examples of overbearing parents and fathers, sports parents, and the different effects of that. Todd Marinovich went the bad way when he got to the NFL. The Williams sisters, that turned out pretty good, that Richard Williams was an overbearing father and demanded so much of them in tennis when they were growing up. And that's who Carl Williams is. I mean, he started this at 12 or 13, getting him with all the top quarterback coaches in the country. He really started to make Caleb Williams a brand when he was 13 years old. So is he going to be the Williams sisters, or is he going to be Todd Marinovich? I think odds are higher that he's going to be Todd Marinovich. And with Archie Manning, he played that card one time. I get the comparison.
Yep.
And he did play his hand big time in that draft. But we never heard anything from Archie Manning again. To my knowledge, Archie Manning hasn't tweeted anything slamming Tom Coughlin back in the day or been critical of Peyton or Eli's, coaches or teammates or anything like that. He played it one time. He played it well. They won, and it ended up working out for the Giants and Eli.
Oh, I think Archie knew what he was doing, too, when he did it. Like, that he knew. Number 2, if Chad was GM of the Bears and had the number 1 pick, who would he pick?
Whew. I would consider keeping Justin Fields.
Oh, no.
Even though Justin Fields has not proven himself to be the guy, but you still have him for one more year on the rookie deal. The weird thing with the Bears is I don't think their roster is terrible. right? So, like, if it was just, okay, keep Justin Fields and go get the best available player that's not a quarterback. But I don't know that their roster's in that spot. So, again, I said I would consider it. But what I would ultimately do is draft Jaden Daniels with the number 1 overall pick at quarterback. I really think that he's got the biggest upside of anyone in this draft. Drake May's fallen off to me this past season. I really liked him coming into the year. I thought I'd love him more coming into this draft. But I think I would stay away from Caleb Williams, and I'd go with this year's Heisman Trophy winner, Daniels.
One Drake May supporter in the league told Yahoo's Charles Robinson, who said this on Robbie and Joe yesterday, that he, who thinks Drake May should go number 1 overall, thinks Drake May will fall in the draft on draft night. If Drake May were to fall to the 7th overall pick, would you take May and trade Will Levis, or would you trade the pick and keep Will Levis?
I would trade the pick if someone was very eager to trade up and you're going to get a haul for it to draft Drake May. I'm keeping Will Levis. I mean, look, I've been very consistent with Will Levis on this. I haven't seen enough to say that he's the ultimate franchise quarterback, and I definitely haven't seen enough to say that he's a bust or anything like it. I'd like to see him stay healthy for an entire season. He had problems with his health at Kentucky. He had problems with his health here with the Titans. Now, we can easily say he didn't have an offensive line in front of him, and that was a contributing factor, which it was. But he has shown the arm talent. He's got the passing ability. I'm sticking with Will Levis. I'm trading down if someone really wants to trade up, and I'm getting more picks out of it, and I'm going to get some quality later in the draft. But I'm sticking with Levis. I'm not considering drafting Drake May.
Will there be a market for Derrick Henry?
Yeah. I think there's going to be a market for Derrick Henry. I don't think it's going to be top dollar or anything like that, but I do think that Derrick Henry ultimately wants to win a Super Bowl. I do believe that about Derrick Henry. I don't think that he's a guy who's going to talk about wanting a ring and then going and signing, with some awful team.
J.J. Watt saying he wanted a ring and then signing with the Chargers or with the Cardinals.
Right. Exactly. Derrick Henry's not going to sign with the Cardinals. Let's put it that way. He's not going to go sign with the Washington Commanders. I think he's going to have his pick between, let's say, Ravens, Eagles, Bills, Dolphins, maybe on a 1-year deal. It's going to be a team that we'd all say, oh, that's a contender. When he makes the move and signs, we're going to say that makes sense because that's a team that could conceivably win a Super Bowl this year. So I see that happening, and I think he's going to have a market of those teams. I don't think it's going to be anything past a year or two on the contract, and I don't think it's going to be for top dollar, but there's going to be a market for him. Maybe not the money that he wants, but I think it's going to be an aggressive market for those teams that are in contention.
Dalton Knecht is the best Tennessee basketball player since who?
Chris Lofton. I think he's the best scorer that we've seen since Chris Lofton. I don't know that I've ever seen anyone like him in my lifetime, though, at Tennessee. He outscored Auburn 25-21 in the final 11 minutes of the game by himself the other night. And it's not like they're playing, Missouri in that game. They're playing one of the top, I would say, top 5 or 6 teams in the country. I really think Tennessee, Auburn, and Alabama, whenever they decide to play defense, are 3 of the 6 or 7 best teams in the country. And the net rankings bear that out. I think right now those teams are 5, 6, and 7 in the official NCAA net rankings. And I'm putting Kentucky up there too, who's starting to figure it out. And they've got a ton of NBA players on that team and could go on a deep run in March. But for Knecht, I mean, he is transcendent as a scorer. And he is a guy, I think Rick Barnes said it's the best offensive performance he's ever seen. And he compared it to J.J. Redick, who scored 43 against him at one point. And he said, those guys can just make you feel helpless at any given time. And he said, I think Dalton made Auburn helpless in that game. They were throwing 2 and 3 guys at him. They were bear hugging him. They really couldn't do anything. It wasn't like they were playing bad defense. He was shooting threes 5 feet behind the line with a hand in his face, almost blocking the shot. And he was still able to score. So it's been fun to watch as a Tennessee fan. I'm going to go all the way back to Chris Lofton as the last guy I could think of that was that good offensively. But I think Dalton Knecht in a 1-year punch is better. And he's got a claim for the National Player of the Year. He's definitely going to be a first-team All-American. I think he's definitely going to be the SEC Player of the Year. And I think he's going to be right there with Zach Edey for National Player of the Year.
I will just say this. The other night, I thought I was watching Michael Jordan play for Tennessee.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I've been joking. Like, the first game I watched, and this is why I always tell people, like, I don't need your advanced metrics to tell me somebody's good. Like, I can turn on the TV and I can see whether or not they're good. The first game that I watched this year, I think it was when they played North Carolina, I'm like, that guy looks like Larry Bird. And now, I mean, the other night, he looked like Michael Jordan. Like, I am.
It's incredible. I was sitting there next to my wife, and one of my kids was still awake at this point in the night. And she wasn't really even paying attention. And during that stretch, I just kept pausing it and fast forward and say, well, watch this. Watch this. Watch this one. Watch what he does here. And even some of those mid-range jump shots, you talk about the Michael Jordan comparison, not that we're saying he's Michael Jordan, but the fadeaways, the tough twos he hit from 15 to 19 feet at times, I mean, it was not just one thing. It wasn't like he just went crazy from three. I think in that stretch he was 9 for 10 from the floor, 3 for 3 from three. He had 2 driving dunks. He had a tough 2 finish. He was getting to the free throw line. He had 2 or 3 mid-range jump shots that were all tough. It was incredible to watch. I mean, I can't think of a Tennessee player that I've really watched in my lifetime that's that good. Allen Houston, I guess you could go all the way back to Allen Houston. He was there longer to find that guy. But, I mean, I think he's a top 5 or 10 pick in the NBA draft.
See, that's why I asked since when, only because I could think in my head, like, I wasn't around for Ernie and Bernie, so, like, I can't go that far back. Chad Withrow, as always, with us. By the way, how shocked are you by the fact that Jerry Stackhouse 3 years in a row has beaten Eric Musselman?
It's crazy. He's got his number. I was watching some of that game the other night, and I also thought to myself, well, that seals it. He's definitely not getting fired, as I predicted. He's going to show enough now. He won that game. I bet he wins another one or two. Maybe he wins a game in the SEC tournament, and they're going to point to improvement at the end of the year. And I now firmly believe 100% that he will be back next season.
I still think he's getting fired. And by the way, I do love the fact, did you see the Door Report put up a picture of the Last Supper with Jerry Stackhouse in the middle and them as Judas? After you said that last week on the program?
That's pretty clever. Oh, by the way, update. I heard from one of the guys on the Door Report who heard our segment last week. And he just said, hey, I heard your segment. I thought everything you said was fair. There's just no mutual interest.
What?
In the interview. And I said, all right, man, all good. Have a great weekend.
What? I told them to have you on the show.
They should. I mean, hey, they're riding high off that win in Fayetteville. Now's the time to have me on and talk about that win. I mean, come on. I'm willing to do it. I don't, he said he's not interested in having me on. So, hey.
I'll just say this.
Jared. We tried.
I'll just say this, and I'll leave it at that. Like, it is obvious to me that Tennessee fans, the ones that live in Nashville, do keep up with Vanderbilt to a certain extent. Like, not like life or death or anything like that.
Not the way Vanderbilt keeps up with Tennessee.
No,
yeah.
for sure. But, like, if you were to go on that podcast, I do think that would get more Tennessee fans to kind of, like, see them as the Vandy podcast and probably elevate them some one way or another. But that's all I got. Chad Withrow from Outkick.
It's something I would definitely do. If I were in their position, I would absolutely do it. But, I can't make decisions for other people. Chad
Withrow from Outkick. Chad, appreciate you.
Man, have a great weekend. Always fun coming on with you, Jared.
Yep, Stillman and Company. Big one tomorrow for the Predators. 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Evangelista digs it, gives it out to score. Brian McDonough scores against his home team. Predators take a 6-1 lead.
6-1 and 7 in a row. And boy, I tell you, all is right in Predator land. And I could not be happier. I mean, again, last night when I'm watching the game, because look, a win streak is a win streak. And I try not to get too worked up and too ahead of myself and too, oh my God, look at this win streak and everything else. But last night, I'm sitting there thinking, this is a big one. You know, this is a playoff game. This kind of has the feel of a playoff game, the kind of feel where it's like you're up 2-1 in a series, and if you win this game, then you know good well the series is all but over, where if you lose this game, now it's 2-2, and it's anybody's series, and so it's a big pendulum swing. And the Predators took the big swing last night, and early on, when it was 1-0, again, I thought it was a bad goal. It was a rebound. I didn't think Saros should let in. And after what I thought was a bad rebound and then a bad goal and a fluky kind of bouncy goal and the puck's just going in, and it's like, boy, you know, he can't win them all, and now they're going to finally play from behind, and, well, let's see. And after that happened, immediately, Roman Yosi comes down and makes a superstar-level play, which is exactly what superstars need to do. It's just like what Forsberg did in the Anaheim game when the Predators when it was tied 1-1 in, I think, the third period, and all hell was breaking loose right in front of the net. And the Predators found a way to keep the puck out between Lankinen and Sherwood. And then right off the faceoff, down the other side of the ice, Forsberg just fires one in where he's just like, all right, guys, I'm going to put the superstar skills on display. Yosi did that last night to tie it. And then immediately the Predators have the action in front of the net, and Cole Smith pokes one in, a real grinder, dirty goal. And when I saw that, I said, I literally was eating. I put my fork down, and I was like, boys, we might have something here. And I'm not just talking about tonight's game. I'm talking about we might have something, period. Which takes me to kind of the second element of this, which is every game it feels like this team has won on this trip. And I'm not just counting, the road trip, but I'm talking about this winning streak. Every game they have won, it feels like there is another hurdle that raises the bar higher each time, right? So, for instance, the Predators go on the road and they beat St. Louis, and that was just that one game. They were embarrassed against Dallas, and they were playing a game against St. Louis, who was ahead of them in the standings at the time, and if they wanted a puncher's chance, they had to win that game. And then they did. I mean, Yosi and McDonough were saying after the Dallas game, they were like, our season's on the line Saturday. And so they won. Then they go to Vegas. And it's like, okay, can you really compete with some good teams here? And can you really, establish yourself on a road trip? And they did. L.A., that game had even more juice than the Vegas game because, again, L.A. is in a wild card spot just like you. So you needed to win. You needed to keep the momentum. It was a biggie. And you got it. Then the two trap games. The way the Predators have been playing this year was they would win the LAs, they would win the Vegases, but then they'd lose the trap games. They didn't lose the trap games. They didn't even play great in those trap games, especially that third period against San Jose and the first two against Anaheim. Then they come home to Ottawa. And everybody's telling me, well, Ottawa has more talent than their standings and their placements say they are. And, you've got to be careful in this game. And the Predators had not been good at home. And we're all talking about Thursday against Minnesota. And so I'm like, all right, let's see if the Predators can win another one of these trap games. And they did. And they dominated, especially in that third period. And then there was last night. And last night had a playoff feel to it. It had a playoff feel all day. And then all of a sudden, they kicked that ass. So guess what? Tomorrow, now it's a measuring stick game. We know the Predators are more likely than not to make the playoffs. Now, somebody's got to explain to me how this moneypuck.com works, Because yesterday they said if the Predators won in regulation, they'd have a 72% chance of making the playoffs. Now, Money Puck this morning says 66.6% chance of making the playoffs. Well, there's a big difference between 3 out of 4 and 2 out of 3. So somebody's got to explain to me how that works. But regardless, Colorado's making the playoffs. They're 9 points ahead of you. You're probably not going to catch them. But we all know that the Avs are a legitimate big boy contender. That when it comes to who's going to hoist the cup, and we talk about the top teams, they're right there. Like, sure, like if we were to look at the standings, we would see Vancouver ahead of them, Dallas ahead of them, Winnipeg ahead of them, but let's not kid ourselves. When it comes to teams that are built to win the cup, Edmonton, Vegas, Toronto, the Panthers, Laviolette and the Rangers, the Bruins, who I think would be questionable in the playoffs, and even last year was kind of an example of that, and the Avs. The Avs are legit. We know. They've already won a cup. They have been great ever since you knocked them out 6 years ago in the 2018 playoffs. They've been a contender. Division seeding and home ice in the playoffs and all of that's concerned, they're battling in order to try to get ahead of Dallas, get ahead of Winnipeg. I mean, there's a legitimate possibility for them that if they go on a heater or that if they, there's a legitimate chance they're probably not going to catch Vancouver as far as best record in the West, but there is a legitimate chance that they could win this division in the Central, and Vancouver could get knocked out by Edmonton or Vegas or you. And Edmonton and Vancouver could get knocked out, and then they've got home ice through the Western Conference playoffs. So every game matters to them. They are a legit cup contender. And it's like earlier today, Robbie and Joe asked me, they said, do you think that the Predators are now contenders? And I sighed, and I was like, no. But I didn't think that the 2019 Titans were contenders until the 2019 Titans got to the AFC title game, and now sitting there saying, hey, we spend all year talking about whether or not this team could compete for the Super Bowl or what this team has to do to compete for the Super Bowl. And here you are on Sunday competing for the Super Bowl. And so while I can't sit there and say cup contenders, I can't say it. If you put on a dominant performance against Colorado, the way that you've dominated the last two, outside of that awkward, horrendous 30-minute stretch of hockey against Ottawa the other night that clearly didn't doom you. I mean, if you're able to take care of business there, I mean, I feel very, very strongly that this team could convince us, even by next Friday, that they're contenders. Now, again, after this one, and I don't want to look too far ahead, but Montreal and Buffalo, they're nothing to write home about. But that's another thing, too, which is, man, you really could, if you win tomorrow, reel off 10 in a row going into the deadline. And so tomorrow night, that is a freaking biggie. Like, that's a biggie tomorrow. And I know you're going to say, Jared, you've said that about all these games. I know, because it feels like the bar keeps getting raised every single game that they win. I can't wait for tomorrow. I'm so glad it's at 5 o'clock and it's not at 7 o'clock like normal, because if it was at 5 o'clock, if it was at 7 o'clock, I'd be waiting there at 3 o'clock like, God, when's the game going to start? Like those miserable playoff 8:30 start times, which, boys and ladies, get ready for. Because there's going to be, if you make the playoffs, and it looks like you will, if you make the playoffs, there are going to be some 8:30 starts, especially if you're having to go to Vancouver, in which the Stillman and Company program would love to be in Vancouver for games 1 and 2. But again, tomorrow night, Colorado, our pregame coverage is 4 o'clock. But this one, it is a biggie tomorrow for the Predators. Like, I am, it's like as soon as they won that game last night, I'm like, all right, bring on the biggie. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Stillman and Company, Fireball Hot Take Friday. We roll along, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
John just said he's very firm. There will be no gray area. Everybody will know what their role is. When there's things that need to be corrected, he will correct them. And I think that New Jersey's loss is our gain.
Back it comes to Roman Yosi, dragging the puck, turning down low right, and it's jabbed into the net.
How frustrating to be swept, first time that's happened in franchise history?
Well, it's certainly disappointing for sure. I mean, you come in and you work 82 games to be able to get in the playoffs, and unfortunately, this series didn't go the way that we wanted it to go, and the fact that we weren't able to win a game is something that we all take personal for sure.
Predator steal again. Cole Smith couldn't get a stick for it. He scores.
And I think John Hines has done a good job. I think he's done a good job. He did a great job last year. He made some tweaks this year. Like, Jared, at some point, I want to come on this show and you can talk about the forecheck. You know, I want you to learn the game, you know? So you're not just saying this is John Hines' fault.
To Forsberg. Here's a shot of the score!
Well, Coach, if you look at the stat sheet tonight, according to Willie Donick, it felt like you guys won in all areas minus the scoreboard.
Some room in front of the score! Are you ready for a frosty?
Someone needs to convince me that Barry Trotz didn't do John Hines really dirty on this one.
Evangelista digs it, gives it out to score! Predators take a 6-1 lead.
I thought from a competitive standpoint, we weren't close to where we needed to be in a lot of areas of the ice. You know, and you could arguably say tonight we got what we deserved.
Is this just the glimpse of an identity that you wanted to see out of this group, perhaps?
Yeah.
Can't I gloat a little bit? That's right. The Predators taking care of business against John Hines after all the years that people told me, Jared, you're not being fair to John Hines. Jared, you're not giving John Hines a fair chance. Jared, John Hines has turned this thing around. Jared. And at times, I will say this, John Hines is not a terrible hockey coach, okay? But I like my hockey coach better now. Like Andrew Burnett, the way he's got these guys humming, this is what I like to see. This is the entertaining hockey. But one thing I will say, in all the gloating and all the celebrating and everything else, nobody wins the cup in February, and you certainly haven't won the cup. As of right now, if the playoffs were to start today, you're the 8th seed in the West. So you'd have the hardest road. Not that the Predators couldn't get there. We've, done this before. We've seen it. But on one hand, we do have to be fair here. And John Hines did beat the Predators 6-1 in his coaching, the beginning of his tenure in Minnesota. I can't remember if it was his first game or his second game. But he did beat the Predators, a game in which, by the way, we guaranteed that I said, look, these Minnesota boys that night, they're going to come out guns a-blazing against the Predators just because, it's John Hines' former team and he's their new coach and everything else. So I'm not going to take anything away from it. And I will say this, too, when it comes to gloating and celebrating and, throwing dirt on John Hines, I guarantee you that it probably bothers people that, I've been up here today saying, simply because of how much they like that guy. I mean, they really, 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 really liked him when he was head coach of the Predators. I had somebody tell me, that had worked with Laviolette and worked with Hines and had been here for a while, and they were like, Laviolette, he goes, I don't think much about him. I'm not sure he thinks much about me. And then I said, well, what about Hines? And he's like, I do whatever that man says. I'd run through a wall for that guy. So they did like him here. And again, Barry Trotz said many times, including on this program, he said that John Hines is a good coach and that if it wasn't for Andrew Burnett, then he would not have hired John Hines. And so let's keep that in mind. With that being said, though, is it wrong for me to look at my hockey team right now and say, this team made the right choice, that this team has the right coach? Is it too early for all of that? Is it too early to say, because you know how I feel about narratives, right? When, oh no, Jared, the reason why this is the case is because you don't understand. And you know how I feel when people start doing that. Right? Like when I asked David Poyle about, hey, if New Jersey likes John Hines so much, then why'd they fire him? And it's like, oh, well, I don't know. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I try not to get too into narratives. And a very convenient narrative to believe right now would be that the Predators made the change to Andrew Burnett. It took time for them to, figure out the lineup, which guys like Parsonen and Tomasino and guys they thought were going to be a big part of this team this year, they're down in Milwaukee. and guys like Kiefer Sherwood and Mark Jankowski are up here in Nashville, which I don't think anybody expected. It took some time for that, and it took some time for them to figure out the system, which is why Roman Yosi is out there looking like Connor McDavid when earlier in the season, Yosi kept dropping his head with the puck in the back of the net. So I'm trying not to get too caught up into it. Adam Vingan got on my case when the Predators made the switch at general manager and they went to Barry Trotz. And Barry Trotz signed Ryan O'Reilly and Luke Shen. And I mean, Vingan, I was like, great. I like it. Serial winners. On we go. And Vingan was like, oh, you're a Barry Trotz bobo. You're just so pro Barry Trotz. And I told Adam, I'm like, Adam, I wanted to change so badly that, I mean, honestly, I don't know who they could have brought in that I probably wouldn't have liked or I wouldn't have listened to and said, hey, man, I'm on board with this guy because I was ready for a change. But when it comes to Trotz, what I like is he doesn't BS us. He keeps it real. And he comes on this program, and if I don't like something, I tell Barry Trotz I don't like it. I don't have to sit there and try to ask a question a certain way so that he doesn't get offended. I just ask him. And so that, you know, when somebody's not a BSer, that plays a big role with me. You know, that means a lot to me. But at the same time, it still feels a little premature to be getting too excited. Because if the shoe were on the other foot and things were not going that way and the Predators were sellers like we all thought they were going to be 2 weeks ago, like if that were the case, then I'd be saying, hey, guys, these things take time, and I still think Burnett's the better coach, and I still think this, So I want to say it. I want to say it today. I want to say the Predators were right, and Burnett is the right coach. And you know what? I do feel that way in my heart. And I want to say they're on their way with Barry Trotz, and he knows where they're going, and he knows where he's taking them, and he knows this, But I do recognize that, again, if this were the other way around, I would be defending them. I would be, again, standing up for what I thought, you know, in years past. So while, yes, I am happy with the direction they're going, it's not that Hines is a bad coach. It's that I think Burnett's a really, really good coach. It is still probably a little early to get so excited over that 6-1 win, in which, again, I do feel like I'm kind of bouncing off the walls a little bit celebrating it. That's going to do it for us on this Fireball Hot Take Friday. Everybody have an absolutely wonderful weekend. Big hockey game tomorrow night. 5 o'clock. Our coverage starts at 4. We got great basketball as well. The Combine's on this weekend. We got a lot to get to Monday, and we'll do that at 2.
The high speeds.
Trouble, got a